Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order at 9:03 and ask Executive Director Ross to take roll.
All right, Dr. Kaur,
Present.
Vice President Haley,
Here.
Superintendent Horn,
Here.
Member Katniss is not with us today. Member Clark,
Here.
Dr. Clay. I know Dr. Clay is joining virtually, so have her in a second. Dr. Hagerman,
Present.
Member Kravickas,
Here.
Member Meyerson,
Here.
Dr. Robbins,
Present.
and then Member Tovar is not with us today. Dr. Kaur, you have a quorum?
Thank you so much. And as far as my report, just such a wonderful time of year, graduation season. So I know across the valley and across the state, lots of proud moments as folks cross the stage with high school diplomas, community college degrees, and university degrees. So our congratulations to all of them. And then just a quick housekeeping reminder to my colleagues on online during actual votes, if you can make sure that your camera's on, that would be great. So in the interest of time, that will conclude my report, and I'll turn to the superintendent for his report.
Thank you. The press likes to write about controversies, understandably, but I wanted to make the point that 90% of my time and effort and that of the department go into our main goal, which is helping the schools improve academic results. Not a sexy thing for the press to write about, but that's 90% of what we do. We have 16 initiatives, and in case anybody wants to see a copy, they're on which table, Sean? Anyone can get one from Melissa, and I think the board members have been given them. We'd also attach them when I distributed my State of Education speech. And then one thing not on that list, but that we've invested $40 million on, is free tutoring. And over the weekend, I got a text from somebody who said my friend's son was having some initial issues in first grade with reading. And because of the free tutoring he's been able to receive at Anasazi Elementary School, her son is now the fastest reader in his class, and it's turned around its reading capacity with this one-on-one online tutoring. So this program is revolutionary and very, very powerful and successful. Keep it up, which of course we will do. And then I was going to mention two controversies. One is there's been concern by some parents about special ed students being required to graduate at age 18, where if they don't graduate, they can get services through age 22. And I want to make the point that Arizona is a local control state. All of the power by Arizona statute about when a student is to graduate rests with the local governing board of each district. Neither the Arizona Department of Education nor the Arizona State Board of Education has authority regarding the timing of individual student graduation decisions. That's something totally in the control of the local districts. And the other thing I was going to mention is that I see people are still expressing some concern about dual language. That's a matter entirely in the hands of the courts. And I think that's important to keep in mind. The courts will decide one way or another. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Horn. And then I think now we'll move on to everyone's favorite part of our meeting. And I'll have Executive Director Sean Ross tee it up for us.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. As always, it is my pleasure and honor to begin the meeting with highlighting two of our students of the month. As you know, we began this program just this year and select two kiddos each month to come and present. They're nominated for their quality in academics and or sports and or character or volunteerism. So always nice to get to hear from the best of Arizona and the best that Arizona has to offer. So up first, we have Owen Toll, who is a sixth grade student at Paseo Point Dual Language Academy. He was nominated by Principal Roloff. Owen scored highly proficient on both ELA and math state assessments, including a perfect score on math. After entering the school in third grade, he's worked really hard to become proficient in multiple languages. He's a rising star on the school soccer team and is a friendly competitor who helps his classmates excel academically and athletically. So Owen, go ahead and come on up.
Members of the board, I want to thank you for having me here today. My name is Owen Soul. I'm in the sixth grade at Paseo Point Dual Language Academy. To start, I just want to give thanks to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for the abilities and opportunities He continues to bless me with. I would like to give thanks to the board for the recognition, and I would like to give thanks to my parents, teachers, and mentors and classmates for giving me guidance and helping me grow. I truly love the atmosphere of my school. Everyone always has a great attitude and is very kind. I also love what our school has to offer. We have an archery team, drama club, and also coding club. This is a lot for elementary school to have opportunities like this for kids like us. Also, something that has helped me grow as a student are my friends. My friends always push me to do my best and be my best. We're very competitive, but that is what helps us get better. They do not only help me in school, but also in soccer. Soccer is my favorite thing to do. In the future, I plan to play professional soccer and attend college. To help me with this dream, I would like to attend Brophy. These are my plans for the future, and I feel like this award is a great step into achieving my dreams. Thank you again for recognizing me as Student of the Month for the state. I feel so honored.
Very nice. Owen, you want to come on up here for a picture?
Congratulations.
What position you playing soccer? Center back.
That's awesome. Thank you for your testimony.
Keeps you in the center of stuff. Do we have mom and dad
Yeah,
there?
let's do that.
Yeah.
All
Oh,
right,
absolutely.
good.
Yeah.
Nice to see Mom and Dad. All right.
Very nice.
Great job, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
But wait, there's more.
So our second student this month is Bilal Abelfutu. I think I said that correctly. He's an 11th grade student at Paragon Science Academy, nominated by his principal, and is a participant in Sonoran School's mentorship program, where he has received certificates and a silver medal. He's achieved one of the top levels in the Congressional Awards program, which includes academic, volunteer, and physical fitness goals. And he's completed over 200 volunteer hours, over 100 personal development hours, and over 100 physical fitness hours. And so we're really excited to have Bilal with us today. Come on up.
My name is Bilal Abelfutu, and just last week I graduated high school from Paragon Science Academy. The thing I love about Paragon Science Academy is how the teachers make learning happen naturally. My teachers instilled in me that the difficult I can do right away, the impossible only takes a little longer. My greatest accomplishment is being awarded the Congressional Award Gold Medal for completing 400 hours of volunteering. The person who inspired me to do this is my Sonoran School's mentorship program teacher, Mr. Tech. Mr. Tech encouraged me to volunteer by fixing Chromebooks for my school, tutoring kids, donating clothing, donating food, and helping at school fundraisers. The thing I've learned from all of this volunteering is that it feels absolutely amazing. And I definitely believe that more people should try to take time out of their day to volunteer. It feels good to do good. My future plans are to attend ASU and pursue a degree in electrical engineering. My goal is to work in the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, researching ways to make renewable energy more efficient and reliable. Thank you, Mr. Naji, for nominating me, and thank you to the Arizona Board of Education for awarding me this great honor.
Dr. Robbins, you let one get away here. He's going to ASU.
I know it's unfortunate for us, but great for ASU. What an incredible speech.
Very diplomatic.
Sure. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes the executive director's report.
Thank you so much. Then I'll move us on to item 2. This is the call of the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items not on today's agenda or on the consent agenda. Today, for all the call of publics, the speakers will be asked to limit their remarks to 2 minutes. Director Ross, have we received any requests for this call to the public?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up first, we have Georgina Monsalvo, followed by Sharinda McMullen, and then Matthew Harvey. So it looks like maybe Georgina's not with us today. Sharita McMullen? Matthew Harvey? Matthew Harvey will be followed by Randy Peraz and then Joshua Hawkins.
Good morning. My name is Matthew Harvey. I'm the proud parent of Bridget Harvey, a 3rd grade student at Bologna Elementary in Chandler Unified School District. My daughter is about to complete her 3rd year of the dual language Spanish program, and I'm here today to share you a little bit about my perspective for the program. In the beginning, I was not sure if this was the right program for my daughter. However, I have seen firsthand and has made me a true believer. Over the past 3 years, my daughter has made great progress in the measurable skills of reading, math, and science. On top of those measurable skills, she has grown in confidence, leadership, acceptance, and understanding. She is learning so much about a culture that she'd only be learning maybe in a book or on TV. I am beyond grateful for everything the school has done when coming to this, because I personally do not speak a foreign language of any kind. So what Bologna Elementary has done is taken a blueprint that was handed to them, and in my opinion, made it a gold standard. In closing, I'd like to share a quick story with you. I know I'm limited, so I apologize. I'd like to share a quick story with you. Bridget is no different than any other 8 or 9-year-old, as she is involved in many activities outside the school, like running club, softball, and Girl Scouts. Each year, she has set herself a goal to sell more cookies than she has the year before, which is great. She's pretty fortunate because she has 2 parents that love to play softball. So we actually take her over to Freestone Park on Friday nights, and she sets up her booth and she does her little thing. This year, it's kind of interesting and kind of neat to watch. This gentleman came up to my daughter and started speaking to her. He did not speak any English. My daughter picked up on it instantaneously and started speaking to him, had about a 5-minute conversation with him, told him about all the different flavors, kinds, her troop, where the money was going. And it was just very touching as a dad that my daughter had this confidence to start to speak to someone. And the funny thing was, after this conversation, the gentleman bought 10 boxes of cookies. And he looked at my daughter and told her, in his words, "Now I understand why I see Girl Scouts selling cookies now." In closing, the only thing I would like to say is that what my daughter's learning today is going to benefit her tomorrow and set her up for future success. And I cannot thank enough the staff, the teachers, the administration at Bologna Elementary, Chandler Unified School District, and you all for allowing this program to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Next, we have Randy Peraz, followed by Joshua Hawkins, and then Tiffany Hawkins.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Randy Parras. I just want to do a quick disclaimer before I begin. For the last almost over 2 years, I've been the executive director of the Arizona Education Association. And as of April 30th, I resigned that position. So I'm here in no way representing them, the president of the board of directors, or the members. I'm here as a father of a first grader in Madison School District. I'm here as a taxpayer. I'm here as someone who's been very, very concerned with what's taking place. For the last couple of weeks, I've been reflecting and learning more about what's been going on in this voucher crisis. And now I think it's more of a voucher scam crisis of what's taking place. We're talking about a public school system that has over 1 million students. We're talking about a system now that is 48th in per pupil spending, and yet we're having $1 billion now being redirected to ESA voucher scam. What is taking place here? We're talking about a program that's gone from 12,000 serving the most needy now to serving 77,000. We're talking about wealthy families using a voucher to pay down their private and religious instruction at a private religious school. I went a little deeper. I went into the Constitution. I'm like, how did we get here? So I looked at the Constitution. There says, the Constitution of Arizona says, no public money or property shall be appropriated for or applied to any religious worship, exercise, or instruction, or to support of any religious establishment, any establishment. It further declares that no tax shall be laid or appropriation of public money made in the aid of any church or private or sectarian school. How did we get here? Look at that. So I was 12 years in Catholic school from first grade all the way to high school. My mom went to JCPenney, got a job and paid for it. There's no expectation. So I'm not anti-religion, anti-school. I'm talking about how do we get to a situation where your charge is public education in your mission, public education, regulating public schools. How are you now in the system where you're overseeing money being taken away? This is like the Republican, tax, steal, and spend program. Unaccountable. How do we get here? How did we get here? You're talking about in 2018 voters, 65%, 30% voted against the universal voucher program, rejected it. And now you all backdooring this? Stealing our money, taking our money and putting it somewhere else? This has got to be, you guys should be champions of public education.
Thank you.
This should not be taking place under your watch, and we'll be following up.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Joshua Hawkins, followed by Tiffany Hawkins, and then Carissa Arnold.
I'm Joshua Hawkins. Good morning, board and Superintendent Tom Horn. On January 10, 2024, my kindergartner sustained a broken ankle during the school's first non-instructional fire drill. The school failed to follow the FEMA and state guidelines by providing an adequately trained incident command member in that area. And the school counselor was supposed to be in that area, but was absent that day. Instead, a paraprofessional was sent as a fill-in. Backs were turned, sirens were blaring, and no one was using their red cards as a signal for help. The para who guided my daughter out never notified the teacher of her injury. My daughter tells her teacher, but was told not to interrupt her and wait a minute, but the teacher failed to follow up. In fact, well after the incident, my daughter tells a recess monitor who tells the teacher for a second time, but was once again neglected a standard of care and not sent to the nurse. My daughter notified 3 separate staff within a short time and was neglected at every turn. The nurse was never called over and the parents were never told that day. Not until we picked her up 6 hours after her injury with a severely swollen and bruised ankle. And immediately started asking the school what happened. Who would allow a 6-year-old to walk 6 hours on a broken ankle? Deer Valley Unified School District would, and they did just that. In our investigation, their first written statements they gave us were false, stating she didn't complain and no one was made aware. Signed by her teacher and the principal, claiming that nothing had happened. They immediately changed their statement to reflect more closely what happened after we questioned its accuracy. Principal revealed the para was sent a replacement for the ICS leader of that area in absence of the counselor. This disregards FEMA and state regulations on ICS structures. It was confirmed the recess monitor notified the teacher a second time and still no one sent her to the nurse or notified us. A lot of questions we had and seemed we were not getting the whole story, and the story was changing every time. Following policy, we met with the teachers to get their side. After the staff, we met with the principal who had interviewed them. The district sent someone to sit in without our knowledge prior to the meeting. A week after this meeting, we scheduled a follow-up since the teacher was away on an unrelated emergency leave during the investigation. This follow-up meeting would complete all areas needed to get the full story. The district quickly cut us off, stating no further meetings would be in order. They left unanswered. We submitted FOIA requests that were abruptly refused. From what little they did provide, certain attachments with our name, the Hawkins, were missing. They had legal review it, then came back, said that it was nothing, but didn't provide the document. Asked them what the document Hawkins 2.2.24, as they have yet to provide what is discussing to the district during the investigation of the district. After all this, we had no choice but to file complaints on the staff to obtain the missing details and have a complete investigation. What would you do if they broke your baby?
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Tiffany Hawkins, followed by Carissa Arnold, and then Katie McPherson.
Good evening, Board and Superintendent Van Horn. As my husband just mentioned, we have felt cornered and degraded by the district for such a severe issue and to withhold critical details that would tell us what happened to our daughter. What we witnessed is a lot of avoidance, accountability, lack of transparency, and personal attacks from the district. When the injury first happened, we were already working with the board, so we gave them a heads up. One of the board members chose to respond in an attempt to help us understand that it was our daughter's fault. Paul Carver responded with a story of his own child who was young and failed to follow the expectations of the school, got injured, and was a surprise when he got home. Paul Carver stated that his child failed to follow the rules resulting in the injury and that his child failed to tell the staff. After talking to the school, his child never failed the expectations again. His story differs than what my child did tell 3 staff of her injury. My child followed the expectations and my child was refused to talk to us to provide factual evidence they did everything right. We have been repeatedly told how our daughter has a high pain tolerance and she didn't show clear signs of distress, and their opinion didn't require medical attention. The school failed to adequately provide trained staff to oversee their students as they practice a safety drill. These drills, they receive federal and state funding specifically for resources and training of the staff as required by REAMS. A FOIA request recently revealed that their safety ops coordinator has revealed that no REAMS training, and yet that has held the same position for 24 years and is signing off on all ERP plans annually, along with the superintendent. How is a safety coordinator not trained in approving emergency plans to meet the standards, and the superintendent is signing off on next to him? Since all of this has come to light, the superintendent's wife, Angie Finch, has taken upon herself to defend her husband by attacking us publicly on social media with privileged and confidential information. Angie Finch violated our rights, privacy, confidentiality, FERPA, and HIPAA. 421, Angie Finch posted on an LD15 Facebook page to defame us. Angie Finch lied that we are suing the district because we are simply disgruntled parents. A lawsuit would be news to us. Angie also threw out the staff complaints we are still awaiting action on, blatantly disregarding her position as a substitute teacher in the district and pose a danger to the students she serves. This also jeopardizes the safety and confidentiality of the staff involved. Never once did we take this public until Angie Finch made her post.
Thank
In
you.
this post,
Thank you.
Dr. Kors, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Carissa Arnold, followed by Katie McPherson, and then Bridget Vega.
Good morning. Thank you for your time this morning. I just wanted to come and touch base. We are seeing an escalating issue going on in our schools, and I just wanted to share my personal experience. I had a daughter who was sexually assaulted off campus by a student at our high school. We went through and pressed charges, and what would ensue was 3 years of bullying. Did not just affect my daughter, but also affected my teenage son as well. It got so bad and to the point that my daughter almost took her life over it numerous occasions. We were fighting like crazy with the school and with the district to get accountability going for the student who was encouraging a full group of students to get involved with going after my daughter and son. And the attacks were all going after her emotionally. He was fully aware of what he was doing. Police were involved, school district was involved. It carried over, like I said, a 3-year period. One of those kids would later go on to be accused in the death of Preston Lord. My daughter during that time also watched a weapon discharged on our high school campus. The kid who encouraged that weapon to be discharged was allowed to play football on the campus or back this next school year. Again, the same student who was involved was also accused in the death of Preston Lord. Thank you. I'm coming to you because we are seeing an increase in teens being bullied and kids in schools being bullied. And it is resulting in some of these kids either attempting to or looking at taking their lives because they are not feeling protected in our schools. Our schools are asking our kids to come forward with drugs, with bullying, and anything illegal activity going on, but they don't feel safe. And they don't feel safe because rules are not getting enforced. And so when they do come forward and these kids are coming after them in retaliation, nothing's happening. So my plea to you guys is that we have clear and consistent guidelines for discipline within our schools so that everybody in the public knows what is to happen when there are issues going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kors, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Katie McPherson, followed by Bridget Vega, and then Brian Burton.
Hello, my name is Katie McPherson. I am a child advocate. I'm also a mom of 4 teenage girls who are in high school right now. I'm here today to talk a little bit about what Carissa just spoke about. My job in the community is to touch base with families that are struggling with all sorts of issues. And a lot of the issues that have come my way in the last 2 years do involve bullying, sexual assault, aggravated assault with weapons, sexual abuse, and sexual misconduct by teachers. As parents, we are trying to partner with our school districts and work with this at the lowest of levels. I wouldn't be here today if the lowest of levels had worked. We work with principals, we work with assistant superintendents, we work with long-term suspension coordinators and looking at these issues. And I just continue to see school districts, mostly in the Southeast Valley, really neglect parents, gaslight parents, stonewall parents, and not report and do mandatory reporting as it is stated in statute. I don't know what the solution is. I'm really here to ask for a solution and for your guidance. We've complained, we've gone to school board meetings, we've sat with superintendency. The issue continues. Most recently, several of the missed opportunities involved boys who were unfortunately charged and indicted in the murder of Preston Lord. It's escalated to the point where we are not only losing students to suicide because of this bullying and harassment, but outright threats with weapons and ongoing egregious threats to families themselves. I can only come up with maybe a standard webinar or protocol, a checklist, a sheet of extreme accountability for our superintendents, our assistant superintendents and principals. Not all of them are doing this, but there are several that consistently are willfully neglectful, that are passively corrupt and allowing this behavior to go on inside the culture and what I call a regime in the district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Dr. Corse, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Bridget Vega, followed by Brian Burton, and then if Georgina Monsalvo or Sharita McMullen have joined us.
Before you start, I'd like to ask the lady who spoke last to leave your contact information with me because we need legislative solutions for these things, and I'd like to work with you. Thank you.
Good morning, President and Board. I'm a mother and a child advocate. Change begins with awareness, and we must address the underlying issues of abandonment, control, anger, alcohol, and drug abuse that plague families. We must confront the uncomfortable truths within our schools and communities. We cannot turn a blind eye to teen violence and struggles our youth face every day, from mental health issues to societal pressures. We see skyrocketing numbers in suicide, teen violence, drug use, sex trafficking, and sextortion across the state. As the children not only are trying to navigate through school, but navigate through the digital world, often seeking validation and doing things for clout. We must partner to equip the parents and the students in the communities across the state with the tools to empower to be an upstander, not a bystander. Together, we must lock arms as a state. We don't get to look the other way on this issue. Human trafficking is happening in Arizona across the schools and in our backyards. The average age victims are lured into sex trafficking is 11 to 14 years old. It's a $150 billion industry. This isn't just an East Valley issue. Across the state, we've seen blitz-style assaults, brass-knuckle beatings, military-grade weapons, drugs, murder in the communities, yet no accountability. As we wait for justice for the youth and the most recent case, Preston Lord. Across the state, parents are asking for the Board of Education to implement updated policies in the handbooks across the state with bullying, including social media clauses, vaping in the bathrooms, assaults, including sexually, along with policy and procedure for failed mandated reporting. We'd also like to ask for vape detectors for all public and charter schools with bathroom check-ins. Next, we ask for the principals and/or counselor to always be present with an SRO, so there's always 2 mandated reportings as we continue to see teachers get arrested for sex crimes against children. Lastly, we'd like for a partnership to connect the board with tools with nonprofits such as Bark and Red Light Rebellion, that is boots on the ground every day working with the youth currently in trauma-informed training and prevention programs addressing physical, emotional, spiritual health and the importance of digital safety and resilience. That way we have prevention programs implemented across the state to help create safer communities and environments for the children. It's more than a hashtag, it's a child's life. Together, we must rise for the children.
Thank you.
Dr. Corse, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Brian Burton, followed by Maria Gutierrez, and then Kara Guzman. Doesn't look like Brian's with us. I just one more chance, Georgina Monsalvo or Sharita McMullen. Nope. So Jessica will move to virtual speakers. So we have Maria Gutierrez, followed by Kara Guzman, and then Nicole Marquez. Okay, up next we have Nicole Marquez, and that'll be followed by Laura Miyazaki and then Darylyn Phelps.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Great. Well, good morning, President Kaur, members of the board, Superintendent Horn. I wanted to open up with a few words of gratitude after watching last month's board meeting, last month's 5-hour-long board meeting. I just wanted to, again, thank you for what you're doing to support our school children, because it is of vital importance and it's definitely no small feat. So thanks again. I would also like to thank the board for your support of dual language learning. Last summer, you issued a statement reaffirming that dual language is an approved model for public schools to use. Thank you for recognizing the value in that. Also, I wanted to thank ADE for last couple weeks ago. They offered an effective school boards workshop. As a future school board member, a current candidate, I was able to attend, and the big takeaway I got is that as an elected official, school board members represent the vision and values of their community. Across our state, dozens of communities have decided that dual language education, both for English language learners and English speakers, is an important value for them. So again, thanks to the board for also recognizing that value. Hopefully the courts will continue to rule favorably for our school districts and our communities. And I hope the board will also continue to hold the line for our families who see this as a value as well. So thanks again. And that was it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Laura Miyazaki, followed by Darylyn Phelps, and then Lou Plazola.
Why is that not working?
Laura, we can hear you. Please feel free to give your public comment when you're ready.
You are muted though, Ms. Miyazaki. Ms. Miyazaki, are you with us? You are muted. You're welcome to start your public comment. There you go. You're off mute now.
There you go.
Thank you. Sorry, wrong button. Hello, my name is Laura Miyazaki. I am a proud mother of a Mandarin immersion student. She started in Whispering Wind when we started a program. It happens to be in our neighborhood. How lucky are we? This program was just getting started and has blossomed. Our program is strong, and we have 20 some students, even with enrollment down. We have 20 some students in each class. We're staying consistent, and our teachers work so hard to teach our students both in English and in Mandarin. With this, we know what opportunities this will give our daughter for the future, and we continue to see the growth as she's moved on to high school, and will continue in Mandarin, and also with AP credits from those classes as well. So I just want to re-emphasize how much in support I am, and hopefully others, in keeping this program strong, because our students are really excelling. Their test scores are off, so much higher because of this. And the cognitive side of learning a foreign language, especially Mandarin, has definitely has benefits. I appreciate your time and thank you so much for letting me talk about my favorite subject.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Darylyn Phelps, followed by Lou Plazola, and then Brady Rice.
Lou Plazola is ready.
Lou, we're ready for your public comment if you'd like to deliver it. So Lou Plazola, you are up for public comment if you'd like to begin.
Okay, she might be having some technical issues, but we can move on to the next speaker.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next would be Brady Rice.
Hello, everyone. Just also wanted to listen in and provide a simple public comment in support of the dual language immersion. My daughter, I have two of our three daughters are enrolled in the Tarwater Elementary School Mandarin dual language immersion programs. And it's been really neat. Both my wife and I benefited from learning Mandarin Chinese, and I use it daily in my career. And heard about this meeting and wanted to add a voice of support that it's done wonders for my girls' confidence, for their ability to connect with people from different cultures and people who speak Mandarin in our community. And just wanted to add a voice of support in ongoing efforts to make these programs available for the students here in Arizona. That's it. Thank you.
You appreciate it.
Jessica, are we ready for Lou Plazola? Oh, Melissa.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
She looks like she logged off, but I'll try and get her back on. But you can go to the next speaker.
Okay. Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Tristan Sapp, followed by David Specht, and then Kristen Stoffer.
Hello, everybody. Are you able to hear me?
We are. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. I don't use Zoom too often. But thank you very much. My name is Tristan Sapp. My daughter, Olivia, is a student at Tarwater, and she's been enrolled in the dual language instruction program since we moved here 2 years ago. We moved most recently from Massachusetts, where there was no DLI program aside from in Cambridge, where housing prices are over $1 million, which kind of restricts it to the elites, when it comes to education and resources. So when we found out that there was a DLI program here and we wanted to move here, we love Arizona, we love Chandler, we were absolutely thrilled. And the time that she has been here has been absolutely wonderful. Our daughter was actually born in China. I lived in China for about 8 years. My wife is Chinese, and after we moved to the US, our daughter went from being fluent in both languages to floundering a little bit. And seeing her trying to communicate with family back in China and being unsuccessful was a little bit heartbreaking. But now she's able to go ahead and speak fluently with family back in China. When we go out, she hears somebody speaking Mandarin, she can respond and jump in perfectly and flawlessly. She's going to be traveling back to China with her mom on Sunday after school ends for the season. And we're absolutely thrilled that she's going to be able to communicate with all of her family and friends there. I think this is an absolutely wonderful program. It's an amazing resource for the children here in Chandler and Maricopa County, especially because we have TSMC opening up here. We have the Intel, chip fabs and everything else. This is a huge huge thing for the future. And what I'm seeing is, children who are learning Mandarin Chinese, speaking just as well as a child who's, with our daughter's unique situation, being able to grow up between the two countries. And, these are the kids that are going to be at the forefront of this, as the world kind of ages into this geopolitical era. So these are children who are going to be, they're going to be working for high-tech companies. They're going to be in government. They're going to be in business. And, these children from Chandler, from Maricopa County, from Arizona are going to be right at the forefront of it, doing wonderful things for the world. And so, yeah, thank you very much for your time. We absolutely love the DLI program, and we look forward to seeing it progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is David Specht, followed by Kristen Stoffer, and then Ryan Winkle.
David dropped off the call, but Lou Plazola is ready to go.
All right. Up next is Lou Plazola.
This is Dave. I'm on the call.
So we'll go with David Specht next, and then we'll circle back to Lou Plazola. Go ahead, Mr. Specht. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is David Specht. I'm a father of 2 amazing students. I'm an owner of 3 small businesses, and I'm an avid member of the Dad's Club at my children's school. My children are native English speakers. They've had the privilege of participating in the Mandarin dual language immersion program at Tarwater Elementary School. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think all of the outpouring from the parents at that school and in those programs might need to sound like a broken record, because we absolutely love it. We're advocates of it. My son and daughter are both academic high achievers. They're both well-rounded citizens participating in extracurricular activities, including theater, sports, band, numerous volunteer activities. And as part of the dual language immersion program, I've witnessed my children develop greater cognitive flexibility and increase problem-solving skills. Both of my children have had a wonderful experience in the dual language immersion program and are amazing academic citizens thanks to this amazing program. My son is headed to Hamilton High School. My daughter enters Bogle Junior High next year. And both of my children will be taking part in honors, grit, AP programs, and in addition to continuing their foreign language pursuits. I wholeheartedly support the dual language immersion program. I can only trust that you do the same. I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Let's go to next Kristen Stoffer, then Ryan Winkle, and then we'll circle back to Lou Plazola. So Kristen Stoffer, you're up next.
You don't get out enough? Is it that time?
So do we have Kristen Stoffer with us? Okay, then Ryan Winkle. Then Lou Plazola.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share our family's experience today. My child has been attending the dual language immersion program. I'm also a broken record here. I love. In Bologna Elementary and the Chandler Unified School District for 2 years now. We have had an absolutely positive experience with this. Our son, who is 8 years old and is on 2nd grade, can now speak, read, and write in English and Spanish very well. We love that they get to have 2 teachers and share their time equally between them. We love their working materials. Their Spanish and English books are excellent. The way his teachers, Mrs. Alvarado and Mrs. Halstead, coordinate their time and their curriculum is outstanding. It's obviously so much work, but they do it flawlessly, and they have it down to a science. But our absolute favorite part is that they have built their own little community. Their group is very diverse in their backgrounds, but they have a learning environment where there's so much diversity that I can feel and see how it fosters a sense of curiosity, empathy, tolerance, and acceptance of cultures different than their own. And they're getting on their way to have an open mind and being citizens of the world. Our own family has the advantage of being already a bilingual home, But I have spoken with parents of English-only households, and I asked if their children are having a hard time adjusting, if they're keeping up okay. If they told me that they absolutely love that they're being challenged, that so far has been not represented as setback, but a learning advantage for them. They absolutely love that they have the capacity to learn in this way, in a challenging and fun way. Bologna Elementary and Mrs. Chinchilla has implemented a dual language immersion program excellently well, and it's been an invaluable opportunity for our families, and we are very, very lucky to be part of it, and we really hope that it can continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Darylyn Phelps.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Yes, please go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm a parent of 2 children at Tarwater Elementary who are both in the Mandarin immersion program. We first got turned on to the program when we happened to buy a house in the neighborhood just by chance. My husband, when he was in his undergraduate degree, had a really impactful experience where he had a company come into one of his classrooms as a panelist and say, if anyone speaks Mandarin, don't worry about paying for the rest of your degree. Come talk to us. We'll get it taken care of. That obviously hit him hard. He did not speak Mandarin, but it enforced on us the importance of learning a second language as a potential job skill. The job market out there is tough, and I think it's going to continue to get tough for our kids and all the other kids out there. And so having our kids learning another language was very important for us to try and give them some kind of leg up, an advantage that other kids may not have. They have had a great time. They're excelling, and Tarwater is just a wonderful school, and we're so happy that we live in a district that supports this for our students and for our neighborhood. We have actually looked at potentially moving to a place where the climate is a little more livable in the summer, but we have not been able to find an area that has such a wonderful Mandarin program, and we really want this for our kids. So we appreciate your support, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes this call to the public.
All right, very good. And my thanks to Jessica, Melissa, Bruce, Sean for kind of quarterbacking us through that. But super important that we're able to hear from the public, whether they're here or virtually, and appreciate everyone's efforts to make sure everyone had that opportunity. So with that, I will move us on to the consent agenda. And we have items 3A through 3O. And I'll pause here for a second to see if any of my colleagues would like any of these items removed for discussion, or if they're amenable to taking them as a group. Would anyone like anything removed from the consent agenda item today? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve items 3A through 3O?
So moved.
Vice President Haley, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Clark, thank you. Any conversation, discussion? Once again, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. Those in favor of approving the consent agenda item as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Very good. I will move us then back to the call to the public. And this is an opportunity for the public to comment on items on today's general session. Once again, I'll ask speakers to limit their comments to 2 minutes. Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak?
Dr. Core, Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, my apologies. We just have one speaker for this call to the public. Jan Van Amaranjan is with us virtually. Okay, good.
All right. Sorry, I just unmuted myself. Sorry. Thanks, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you beautifully. Please go ahead.
Special thank you to Ms. Ruiz for helping out with this. I really appreciate her help on this and getting some last minute details figured out. So I'm the father of a student in question regarding an appeal with the ESA regarding some listening devices. And I just wanted to express how grateful my wife and are to the board, and grateful for the work this board does to ensure quality education for all students. We're grateful for you. You guys have a tough job, and just listening to everything else. Hey, I want to send my kid up for an immersion program now, so that's really great to hear about that. But you guys have a lot of issues you're dealing with, so thank you for your work. Thank you. We're grateful for the ESA. And we are grateful for the work being done to administer it. We're thankful for those who safeguard the funds to ensure they're not misused. And we're thankful we had the opportunity to appeal. And we're thankful ultimately for the hearing officer's recommendation. Just want to share quickly about our experience. When we appealed, our thought was we'd be able just to sort of sit across from someone and just talk reasonably and say, here's what happened. I think let's just understand this together. And instead, we sort of found ourselves thrown into this litigious process where there are witness lists and attorneys, and we're being objected to, and there's motions. And I just feel like all of it could have been settled if we could have just sat down and said, hey, can we just talk through this? In the end, it's been a time-consuming, really draining process where we spent hours and hours researching and trying to understand what question we're allowed to ask and all these other things. And all we really want is just for hearing impaired students like ours to have access to the same educational opportunities as unimpaired kids underneath the ESA, which includes treating reimbursements for hearing impaired students the same way as others. So we just ask that you affirm the hearing officer's recommendation and uphold it. And again, thanks for your time, and I hope you guys are able to enjoy your service even in the midst of all the issues you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes this call to the public.
Thank you so much. Then I'll move us on to the item 5, which is in fact the general session. This is 5A is presentation and discussion by the state board student advisory panel regarding the completion of its first year and the generation of civics, literacy, personal finance resources for teachers and students. This sounds amazing. Director Ross.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, I'm very excited about this item. This is the concluding month of our first year having a student advisory panel, and I'm actually going to not be the person to talk about this item because this panel on the board side, this project has been led expertly by Shannon Etz, who's our project director, and she's gone above and beyond and done an amazing job. And so I really feel it's more appropriate for her to talk about it as we bring the kids up.
President Kaur, Vice President Haley, members of the board, Director Ross, thank you. Expert is not the way I would describe my leadership of this. I've had a really great group of students to work with this year. Like Director Ross mentioned, this has been our first year having a student advisory panel. It's been a really fun way just to kind of have opportunities to bring things you all are working on to students and get some student opinion. And just has been great for me as a staff member to get to interact with them. They're the coolest people I know by far. So I have a couple of them here to present to you. We're getting close towards the end of our year, so they're just going to kind of talk a little bit about what this experience has been like, kind of tee up what they hope it will be like in the future, and talk a little bit about some of the work they've been doing. This is an incredibly passionate group of students. They care a lot about a number of topics that impact themselves and their peers. So they're going to talk a little bit about some of the work they've been doing within our meetings and outside of our meetings, just kind of independently on their own of things that they want to bring to your guys' attention. So I'll have them come up and introduce themselves.
Please. As the members of the advisory council are approaching, I just want to give one quick notice that we are opening the application for next year. We have opened the application for next year. So we also want to strongly encourage folks to look into that and as they are considering their what to do with their junior and senior year.
Hi, I'm Vivian Atrajan. I'm a current junior at Arizona College Prep.
My name is Sophia Lin. I'm a current junior at Basis Scottsdale High School.
Good morning. My name is Samit Padala, and I'm a graduating senior at University High School in Towson, and I'll be attending UC Berkeley in the fall.
Nice.
And today we'll be presenting kind of our experiences as well as our recommendations going forward with our experience on the council.
Just about. We're bringing up their slide deck.
Sure. Now, you be sure to come back to Arizona from UC Berkeley, all right? They're just borrowing you. They're not keeping you, right? Okay, very good.
Okay, a little bit of background for the student advisory panel. In regards to organization, our panel was started by our founder, Mizuki Yashiro, who was the chairwoman of Arizona's first student advisory panel for the Arizona Board of Education. She first reached out to Director Ross looking for a place where students could share their opinions and uplift their voices in a way where we can make an impact on the Board of Education. So by the end of the summer, applications had been sent out and 10 of us were selected to help essentially provide opinions for students to really highlight the student voice in regards to education in Arizona. And after we started meeting, we've met on a monthly scale through an online platform usually. We also had the ability to meet in person, and we've had a plethora of wonderful speakers come to us, including the Arizona State Treasurer, Kimberly Yee. And we've talked about all issues from Arizona ascending graduates to civics and financial literacy issues, which we will talk about in specifics a little bit later.
Perfect. So Student Advisory Panel has a couple of main projects that we've done over the past year. First off, starting off with Arizona Ascending Graduates. And then one of the biggest things that we've been doing is the civics education guides and the financial literacy guides. So helping teachers, students, and parents learning more about how students can be more involved within our communities and how they can be financially literate for their futures. And then yesterday, we had our first student representation convening, which was a great experience for students across Arizona to learn more from industry leaders about a variety of different topics, mostly about civics and financial literacy. So we just learned about a lot of that yesterday, and it was a really good experience.
And now we'll be having an overview, kind of understanding our projects in more details, those including our civic education resources and for financial literacy. We'll also be detailing some of our progresses and what we've completed in the past.
So our first note is on the Arizona Ascending Graduate Initiative, which essentially was what we arrived from with a lot of our discussions at the beginning of the year. So upon starting this panel, we had a lot of discussions about what were the most pressing issues that we saw among youth in Arizona. And one of our main conclusions from various discussions had been that success takes many different forms and there should be multiple pathways available for students. So this looks like a bunch of different ideas, but essentially we wanted to make sure that students after K through 12 education were able to have the proper resources that they would need for the rest of their lives. So this led us to do a lot of discussion about civics and financial literacy, along with making it available that students would have opportunities to not only learn more about different colleges, community colleges, in-state colleges, universities, along with trade schools and other post-secondary education alternatives.
So for civics education guides, so as I said before, it's a developed guide for teachers, parents, and students. So we targeted specifically for high school, middle school, and elementary school students to learn more about what it means to be a citizen in our democracy within America. Learning more about how they can get involved even before they turn 18. So 18 is being the age of when you can start to vote. And learning more about when students can vote, how they can register to vote, even before they turn 18 through pre-registration, and using the information that we learned as the collective group of the 10 students. I actually registered to vote when I turned 18, and I think it will be very beneficial for other students moving forward to learn more about how they can get involved within our democracy.
And our second area of focus was with financial literacy. So through this, we were able to develop financial literacy guides, kind of covering basic concepts for elementary and middle school students, those including kind of needs versus wants, and teaching them when you should spend versus when you should save, a lesson that even I as a high schooler sometimes struggle with. And with that in mind,
Lots of us do.
And we kind of also want to stem the same thing for high schoolers, but with more advanced concepts such as credit versus debit cards. And with colleges being such a main topic, kind of giving students the resources to discuss how to save and how to have their finances more efficiently in order to make informed decisions and and avoid unnecessary debt, but also ensuring that they're able to build a strong foundation for their financial future. So with these guides, we aim to do exactly that and provide not only teachers, but also students with the resources in order to do so. So I know that we touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but yesterday we were super excited to have our first student representative convening, which essentially was an opportunity for students that aren't part of our student advisory panel to be able to participate in open discussion about a lot of the most pressing issues that we see in Arizona. So we had a bunch of education professionals come visit us, and we split off into breakout rooms where we were able to talk with them, sometimes one-on-one or in bigger groups, about a lot of the issues that we see in Arizona. I personally was able to talk for almost over an hour with the student regent for the Arizona Board of Regents, and not only was it incredibly insightful, but I was able to learn about a lot about our Arizona public universities, and a lot of the questions were answered personally about my future path in regards to college. So a lot of the other topics that were discussed were the Education Career Action Plans, or ECAP, FAFSA and College Ready Arizona, mental health resources, the Seal of Civics Literacy and Civic Engagement, Arizona policymaking, empowering tomorrow's financial leaders, along with the Arizona Board of Regents.
So now that our year is finally over, it was really great. But there are a couple of things that we do want to improve upon in the future, right? There's always room for improvement in everything. First off, we want to do a lot of more in-person meetings with all the groups of students. It's really important to meet in person because it gives that in-person type of feel. It gives that human-to-human connection. We weren't able to do too many of those in the past year, given how busy all of our schedules were. But we actually, all 10 of us, we were able to sit in those chairs. And it was really cool to see just how the board members are able to work together, and then kind of like how students are also able to work together. Moreover, we want to do more marketing towards increasing student participation within the different counties in Arizona. Maricopa County is the most populous county within our state, but there wasn't too much representation for other counties. There were other counties represented, mostly in the more south of our county, but we want to do more outreach to make sure it's more diverse and actually having more parts of Arizona represented. And yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of recommendation. And going on to recommendations towards just the group itself, moving forward to guides such as civics and financial literacy projects. We want to get more opinions from the middle school and high school students and teachers about what they want to see and how they want to learn, because every single cohort has different opinions, ideals that we all need to understand and take into account when we create guides moving forward. So yeah, thank you.
And in terms of our biggest advocacy for upcoming boards in the future, we kind of want to have a more regular and proactive goal in planning the Board of Education's work and amplifying the opportunities for students as a whole. So this year you saw our work with financial literacy as well as civics literacy as a whole. And we would love to partner with the Department of Education and work with actually prospering and forwarding these resources to more and more students and educators alike, so that everyone has access, because these are two very important skills to our education as a whole. And also in the future, we'd like to work on more opportunities to amplify the way that students speak and alert them of opportunities, such as the Seal of Financial Literacy and Civics Literacy, because a lot of times these opportunities go unnoticed. So our biggest advocacy is to actually bolster these issues and make sure that everyone is aware of them.
And then we mentioned our civics and financial literacy resources, but we wanted to put some of them on display here. They're not completely finalized, but our hopes in creating these flyers were to be able to distribute them to teachers to help strengthen their ability to teach students these essential lifelong skills. So as we can see here, there's a couple of generic questions about why do we vote and the importance of participating in democracy. But then we also have a bunch of other reminders for voting, especially given to high schoolers, so they can start to become more cognizant of the process, along with where you can watch presidential debates and a lot of important aspects in participating in our government and our democracy.
And these are more of the guides that have been created. This is more in regards to the personal finance part. As Divya mentioned, personal finance is super important now with how our economy is changing so fast, and learning more about what it means to have a credit card, debit card, credit history. It's so important because nowadays a lot of people want high ticket items, low ticket items, and being able to budget is so important because now in America, a lot of people are struggling. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck, and it's important for people to understand the concepts of budgeting because then they're able to secure their lives and the lives that they're affecting throughout their inner circle. So, yeah.
All right, we have this time for any questions, and thank you again for this opportunity to speak with all of you.
Well done. Any questions from my colleagues? Yep, please, Member Kervikis.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I know you guys have really busy lives and you've given so much to the state, and I really thank you. I'm curious. I mean, probably two of the biggest issues facing schools nationally, not just Arizona, is especially post-COVID, is chronic absenteeism and declining student engagement. You don't have to answer this question now, but I would really love for the Student Advisory Council to help us as a state brainstorm. How do we need to do school differently to re-engage those students? And how do we, or how could you guys and us really target and reach those kids who are struggling? The kids who normally aren't going to go to these conferences and stuff because they are struggling, they're absentee, they're not engaged, and really help us figure out how to grab those kids.
Yeah, I think a lot of the foundation of this year is that because we just started the board, we wanted to kind of establish how we were going to plan on continuing the board in the future. So next year, we're definitely looking for a lot more application directly in schools and trying to get and increase a lot of that student engagement by advocating directly on campus and to students.
And yeah, we also will make sure we ensure opinions from different sides to kind of hit those targeted areas like you mentioned.
Just a quick question. What was a highlight for the three of you in participating in this opportunity?
I'll go first. I mean, I really love everything about this opportunity. I think the in-person meetings were some of my favorite. Hearing the different speakers. I know Sophia talked about Treasurer Yi. I really enjoyed the personal finance sector. So that was something I personally enjoyed, getting to meet those contacts and kind of bolstering my own understanding of financial literacy as a whole.
I agree with Divya, and then also just meeting 9 super like-minded peers across from all different counties of Arizona. I was only able to meet some of them in person, but it was really incredible to be able to work with them on group projects with something that we're all so collectively passionate about. And it was really cool to see how our project ended up and was finalized in the end.
And for me, right, besides what them two said already, I really enjoyed meeting the Mr. Catanese in person, and also after the board meeting that we attended, speaking with them almost for an hour outside of the building, just speaking about life. I really enjoyed that. Also, speaking with Treasurer Yi over Zoom. I think that was really insightful, seeing that how we had one of the highest people within our state speaking to students and taking the time out of her busy schedule and our busy schedule, just talk and teach us more about what it means to be a treasurer and how how she's able to impact students and how we're able to understand that.
Fantastic. Any other? Go ahead, Dr. Clay.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you for what you're doing. In Cochise County, we're also mirroring everything that you're doing. We had started this a couple of years ago. We have started back up again. We're going to start with a summer leadership camp. And I've been taking notes. We're going to be using all of the areas of concern that you've brought up. We're going to go ahead and start working on those. But I would also like you to consider dreaming bigger and trying to reach each one of the counties and having an ambassador for each county. I know you're doing that, but maybe thinking of different strategies to get this going. But this is amazing. I applaud you for it. And if you ever need anything, we're here for you, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. Anyone else? Well, thank you so much. Certainly, individually, you are all so very impressive, and then collectively, your work is just very impressive. So, I am personally committed to making sure you have a Yuma County representative next year, and I can almost guarantee that we'll have multiple applicants from Yuma County to join this wonderful work. So, again, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, if I could just add one thing, the resources that the student advisory panel were developing were also done in conjunction with the department. So I really want to thank members of the department, Hannah Rude, the social studies team over at the department, Linda Burrows, for working with the panel members and really formalizing those documents. The department under Superintendent Horn has developed this library of resources for teachers, and this is going to be part of that. So these really will live if kind of, where teachers and students can access them. And it's an exciting component of their work.
Thank you, Sean. Absolutely. I'm going to move us on to 5B. This is the presentation, discussion, and possible action to open the process for targeted refresh of Arizona's history and social science standards. The board has noticed and is in receipt of really a lot of feedback from the field on this. So I'll turn it over to you, Director Ross.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, in the April board meeting, well, actually, I'll move back a minute from there. This item originally came to the board through a recommendation from Governor Hobbs's office. The governor had vetoed House Bill 2629, bill from Representative Toma calling for a increased focus in the social studies standards on certain concepts. In the governor's veto letter, she asserted that the board is the body that oversees standards, and so was moving the idea over to the board, and then had requested that the board open the standards for a targeted refresh. Since then, we decided to do a presentation in April. I presented on the standards review process that is board adopted. And then Linda Burrows from the department presented on the current social studies standards. We actually very consciously did not bring that item for a vote in April. We wanted you all to have time to absorb. We wanted the field to have time to consider the issue, give feedback. So in the interim between April and May, as you said, we've received quite a bit of feedback. As always, all of that is available in Simbly for public review. And so that has all come in. And so we're bringing the item back, as we said we would, for a possible vote. We actually won't be presenting again. We had delivered the presentation in April. However, I am happy to answer questions. I believe Linda's here. Oh, I gave Linda and Hannah a shout out. They're both here. Hi. Sorry. They did a great job with the Student Advisory Council. So they're both here to answer questions as well if we need.
Yeah, please, Vice President Haley, please.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you for the presentations that we received in April, as well as materials we received. I just had a few quick questions. One, what would be the fiscal note or the cost if we did either a targeted review or a full refresh or a comprehensive change? What would be the cost of that? And have there been resources appropriated to do such a thing?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, Vice President Haley, at this point, there have not been resources appropriated to fiscally support of that project. And I'll give you a general feedback on numbers. Coincidentally, I ran the standards team at ADE for years and oversaw multiple standards reviews. And so a full review of the standards involves a lot of work on the part of the department, and includes bringing educators in from across the state to review the standards and provide feedback. And that process alone, like lodging, mileage, technical experts, in general, a full review runs about $75,000 to $100,000 and takes from start to finish about 3 years. Targeted refresh is a much smaller version of that. It would be, just as an example, in this case, an opening of the standards to look at ideas specific to legislation that had arrived. For example, Representative Thoma's bill this year. So that would be the process in microcosm. So it would still involve bringing teachers in, would be fewer teachers, and a smaller scale project, probably about 6 months to a year at most. And so just in estimating, I would estimate that to be probably about maybe 10,000 to 15,000. Again, these are just general estimates as somebody who did run that project many times over the years, but general estimates. But no money has been allotted at this time in the legislature.
Superintendent Horn.
The department is prepared to budget out of our discretionary funds, the funds that Sean referred to with respect to a full review. And I'd like to indicate why I think a full review is called for. I sent a email to Sean, and Sean was kind enough to distribute to the board with copies of the earlier standards and the current standards. In the earlier standards, the standards are divided between American history and world history. In American history, the earlier standards taught the student will know geographic, political, economic, and cultural characteristics of early civilizations and their contributions to later development of the United States, the causes and effects of exploration, the development of American constitutional democracy, the westward expansion, the Civil War and Reconstruction, the emergence of the modern United States, the Great Depression and World War II, and post-war and contemporary United States. That's the 6th grade standards. I could have come with similar comments from any grade. I just chose 6th grade. That's in my mind, a very good review of what 6th graders should know about American history. Under the current standards, we have no of knowing whether any students learn any of the subjects I've just mentioned or anything else, because it's all general, such as comparing development and characteristics of historic cultures and civilizations without specifying which ones or what they need to learn about them. Similarly, in world history, the older standards require that students learn about early civilizations, Renaissance and Reformation, encounters and exchange, the age of revolution, the age of imperialism, and World War. Those are good topics for world history. There's nothing in the current standards at all that would lead one to believe that the students learn any of these things or any substantive knowledge that we would want students to learn. Now, if we do proceed with a full review and spend the money, we realize it's a gamble because we have to try to reach consensus and then come back to the board, and the board can reject it, or the board can insist on changes to it. It's ultimately the board's decision. But I would respectfully request that we get the opportunity to undergo the review, to involve the teachers, to attempt to reach consensus, and to present it to the board for its approval or rejection or change. And so I'd like to propose an alternate, some slightly different wording to the motion in the agenda, if that's okay. So I move that the board authorize the Department of Education to open the process for a full review of the social studies standards and history standards, and bring those back to the board on conclusion for acceptance, rejection, or change.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'm going to make sure everyone has their questions answered before I even ask for a second. So I'll probably ask you to do that again. So just let's sit on that just for a second,
Sure.
And I'll turn to Member Myerson.
Thank you, President Kaur. Executive Director Ross, could you just give me a sense of, aside from the governor kind of putting this back to the board, what has been the response from the field? I obviously got a chance to read some of the letters and things that you've shared, but can you just sort of give a summary? Because it doesn't appear that anyone from the field is asking for this. And so I'm just curious if you could maybe give a little bit of a summary as to, I think we know how we got here, but just sort of a summary of some of the responses from the field on this.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, Member Meyerson. So we received feedback, written feedback from organizations like the Arizona Charter School Association, Arizona School Board Association, Arizona Educators Association. We received feedback verbally from Arizona Rural Schools Association. To just sort of summarize what those had in common, is the feedback in general expressed concern about moving forward with a review of the social studies standards at this time, based on a few, and again, I'm just kind of summarizing the feedback we received. A few points in particular. One was timing. So the social studies standards had last been adopted in December of 2018. Anytime new standards are adopted as part of the process, there's always a sort of 18-month to 2-year buffer built in, so that schools can review the new standards, train their teachers, look at their curricula before implementation. So the schedule of implementation for those standards was 2020. And so, of course, 2020 came and interrupted the implementation of those standards, 2021 as well. So what the feedback has provided is that for what those organizations heard from their stakeholders was that they'd really only been implementing these standards for 2 years. And so there was a timing consideration. Two, there was a consideration of funding related to curricula adoption, I should say. Some schools had moved forward adopting new curricula based on the adopted standards, most recently adopted standards. So there was a fear of having a relatively recent adoption and then needing to potentially adopt again. For those of you who are unfamiliar, a curriculum adoption can be millions and millions of dollars depending on the size of the district or charter system. Another concern was in training that the teachers had, even though COVID had interrupted. There still had been those 2 years for teachers to receive training from the department and other sources on the standards. So having to do that again. And then another piece that ran through the feedback was the standards process itself is teacher driven. It's I said this in April, and I kind of reiterated it again today. But teachers are brought in from across K-12 to look at specific grade level standards, consider them, discuss them, review them, and then revise them if needed, and do a lot of work. And there was a concern pretty universally amongst the feedback about the availability of teachers at this time during a shortage. So those sort of pieces, I think, captured the biggest through lines of that feedback.
Thank you.
Dr. Clay, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Again, I have a couple of questions, just some clarifying questions. You probably answered them, but I need to ask them again. So I'm taking some notes here. So to clarify, the last change was 2018.
So Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, Dr. Clay, the board voted to adopt the social study standards in December of 2018. Okay. As part of the adoption process, there was that 18-month to 2-year buffer built in for implementation. So they were adopted in 2018, but schools would not have been responsible for implementation until 2020.
With what we have right now, has that been implemented to the furthest, or do we know if that's been implemented? And the reason why I'm asking is I'm just trying to figure out, what do we have now and what is missing? And I guess that's why we're going with a full review, because we have to figure out what's missing. Or do we know what's missing right now? Do we know what is missing that we need to enforce or we need to teach?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. So Dr. Clay, I'm going to take your questions kind of in parts then. Obviously I can't speak for the field about where or when it's been fully implemented, but it's one of the reasons we do solicit feedback from the field. And again, just to reiterate, we received feedback from the organizations that represent charters, districts, teachers, rural schools, and they actually, again, one of the through lines of their feedback was that they believed they had not yet had time to fully implement the current standards. So to address your first question. And then your second question, the feedback from the field, one of the pieces, that those organizations asked their constituents is is there a need for a review? If so, based on what? And so the feedback that came through did not indicate that there was. What I would say is the initial discussion about a targeted refresh was really centered on legislation, centered on, in particular, Representative Thoma's bill calling for, highlighting certain concepts like communism, totalitarianism in the standards. Those concepts are in the standards, but just making them sort of more prevalent. In the past, when legislation of that type has come forward, actually, regardless of the outcome of the legislation, the department's social studies team has always built out resources. They have a really robust resource page, and they've always built out resources centered on whatever the concept was in that legislation. Again, sort of regardless of the outcome of the legislation, because they interpreted that legislation as, oh, there must be a desire for a bit more. Let's see if we can help provide some support. And so, I can't give you a definitive answer on what may or may not be missing, but what originally sparked this item was that bill.
Okay. So here I go. I'm just looking at the unintended consequences of our actions. I always look at that. So basically our choices are a full review, targeted refresh, or maybe table it for next year or something like that, since we are focused on this issue. Is that correct?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, Dr. Clay, that is correct. The board has multiple options before it today for this item. It may vote to approve a targeted refresh, a full review, as Superintendent Horn discussed. It also may vote to table the item until what it deems as a more appropriate time. So that's exactly sort of what's laid out before you.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Yeah, please, Member Krivickas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean, I know that all the standards are kind of on a regular cycle. So what standards are we revising right now, or what's up next? And the reason just so I can skip to the end, the reason I'm asking is I'm thinking about not only staff capacity, but the field's capacity. Are we going to be if this were to move forward, would be trying to do this simultaneously with an entire different discipline?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, Member Krivickas. Let me get the expert in the room to that question. As you know, Linda Burrows is the Deputy Associate Superintendent of Academic Standards. And so she's more familiar with the current standing of the review calendar.
Yes, thank you for having me, President Core, Superintendent Horn, Vice President Haley, members, Member Krivickas. Right now, currently, we don't have any standards that are being reviewed. However, that being said, the oldest standards that would be up for review would be the World and Native Languages standards. We have decided to put those on hold as the national association that deals with world and native languages is currently updating their standards. So we're waiting for their standards to be done as guidance before we move forward with that. And then after that, it would be English language arts and math that is up next for review in the next year or so. Mm-hmm.
Executive Director Ross, I wonder if you could expand on something you shared earlier, that one possible path is the department might be able to put together some additional resources, given that some of the topics that Representative Thoma legislation was centered around are already in the standards to some degree, that there might be an opportunity to develop resources that could just that, expand resources available to educators in the classroom. Seems to me to be a potentially least disruptive approach to meeting both the desires of Representative Toma and Governor Hobbs. How about that? We could satisfy both with one. Can you talk about that a little bit? What that looks like, what the timing of that is, yeah, just talk a little bit more, please.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. So again, historically, and in fact, I'm going to ask if Linda would come up and help Melissa bring up your social studies resources webpage. So actually, will you help Melissa find it, and then we'll bring it up. Sure. So we'll show you the visual of the great work Linda and her team have done over the years to develop resources, so you can get a sampling of them. You know, a good example of this in recent history would be Representative Nguyen had a oral histories bill a couple of years ago, I think. At this point, and I was at the department at the time, and Ketcher was still here as deputy, and we worked together really closely on not just with the board and the department, but with Sandra Day O'Connor Institute and Freedom Schools, a bunch of organizations to develop that platform and those resources, and a mechanism by which more resources can be submitted to the department for consideration, which they still use. So what you're seeing right now is a page that Linda and again, her director, Hannah Rood, have worked really hard to develop. And if we can scroll down a bit, there are some general resources about teaching social studies, but now you're going to start seeing topics that were specifically inspired by legislation. So for example, the teaching of 9/11, the Sandra Day O'Connor Civic Celebration Day, and then even the personal finance piece. This year, there was the bill from, Rico, help me out. Who was the personal finance bill from? Senator Mesnar, thank you. That did not end up moving forward, but still, again, proactively, the department has provided resources. The AAPI resource tab is interesting. There's been a bill probably every year for the last 3 to 4 years calling for that same idea of opening the standards to kind of elevate AAPI in it. And so the department has built out resources, again, regardless of the status of the legislation. So I think this is a really good example. If you keep scrolling, I think you actually eventually do get to the Representative Nguyen oral histories pieces in there as well. So yes, Dr. Kaur, this is a good visual for what that can look like.
Thank you very much. I guess I might suggest to my colleagues that this might meet the needs of what we're being asked to do with the least amount of disruption. But that's just one person's opinion at this point. Other thoughts, questions? We do. Oh yeah, Superintendent Horn, please.
Yeah, I just want to say, based on what Sean said, obviously there's a risk to us in investing the money in this because we're going to have to find consensus among in the field to bring back here. And if we're not able to do that, we have to abandon it. But the question is, what's the need for it? And the need for it is that the current standards have no substance. And an academic standard should have substance. We have no idea. Schools can be in compliance with those standards and students not learn anything about the topics that I spoke about that are so important, both in American history and world history. And that's the basis for my request that we be authorized to at least try to do a general revision. If we can't get if these associations continue to be against it and we can't get a consensus, we'd have to stop. But all I'm asking for is authorization to give it a try, because I think it's an important principle of standards that they have substance, and these standards have zero substance.
So Superintendent Horn, earlier you made a motion that I just asked you to hold on to. If you'd like to restate that, obviously one of our challenges here is there's 8 of us. We'll need 6 of us to agree on something moving forward here. So if you want to restate your motion, we can start with that.
Okay, we'll need 5 out of 8, not 6.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, just to clarify, quorum stands, majority is based on the number of board members, not on the number of board members present. Oh. So it's always out of 11. So
Okay. So I move that the board authorize the department using its own money, discretionary money, to make an attempt to revise the full social studies standards for purposes of having them contain substance, and then come back to the board for acceptance, rejection, or revision unless the effort fails, in which case it would just be dropped and we would just bring back the ones that were requested by the governor.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Any questions on the motion? My colleagues understand that motion as presented. Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? Okay, not hearing a second, that motion fails. I think at this point, is there, I guess just in full transparency, is there anyone who would like to make a motion that would call for a targeted review? In the absence of such a motion passing, we can, the standards would stay. That would not need a motion. We would just, they would effectively be tabled. Okay. Again, this gets a little confusing and I want to make sure my colleagues are all with me. So this is an opportunity if someone wishes to make a motion that would call for a targeted review of the standards. I'll call for that motion if anyone wishes to make that. Okay, I'm not hearing any motion to that effect. So just double checking with Executive Director Ross, there is no further motion or vote needed at this point. No action will be taken on the board by the board at this point on the standards. My understanding is close to correct?
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that is correct.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Let me move us on to 5C. This is presentation and discussion of federal regulations, state law, and guidance related to high school graduation for students with disabilities. This is for information only, but starts a conversation. Director Ross.
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. If you recall at the April meeting, we had a number of folks come to that first call to the public expressing concern about the need to clarify law and rules regarding graduation for students with disabilities, in particular, students for that 5th, 6th, or 7th year cohort for graduation. And so in light of that, we reached out to the department and asked if they would come to present. And so with us today is the Associate Superintendent over Exceptional Student Services, Colette Chapman, and the Deputy Associate Superintendent over Exceptional Student Services, Alyssa Trollinger.
Good morning, President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. My name is Colette Chapman, and I serve as one of the associates at the Department of Education, and I oversee special education or exceptional student services, adult education, health and nutrition, and career and technical education. I also have served as the Arizona State Director of Special Education. I'm going to hand it over to Alyssa.
Good morning, President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. My name is Alyssa Trollinger, and I'm the Deputy Associate Superintendent of Exceptional Student Services, otherwise known as the State Director of Special Education. I've been in this role 8 years, and I've been at the department 19.
Next slide. Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to discuss special education and graduation and to also address some of the public comment we heard last month. Today, I will be giving a general overview, the basics of graduation, receiving a high school diploma, and clearing up any misunderstandings about the department's role in making graduation decisions. Alyssa is going to inform how post-secondary transition activities are different from graduation requirements, and how the entitlement of the transition services and academic requirements can be interconnected and seamless. So I'm doing the general overview. Alyssa will be getting into what is commonly known as the weeds. She'll be, so we're respectfully asking that you hold off any questions until the end of our presentation. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So the decision of when to graduate a student with disabilities rests locally. What we mean by locally is at the district and school level and the charter level. Neither the Arizona Department of Education nor the State Board of Education has authority regarding the timing of individual student graduation decisions. Next slide. Okay. So let's define a high school diploma. It's a written acknowledgement by a school's local governing board that a student has met graduation requirements by successfully earning credit in courses aligned with the state's academic standards. Arizona only recognizes one high school diploma. A general education diploma or GED or a certificate of completion is not the same as a regular high school diploma. Next slide, please. So graduation for all students. All students must meet graduation requirements to earn a regular high school diploma. And if a local school governing board has determined additional requirements are needed, the student must meet them as well in order to graduate. Next slide, please. Are requirements different for students with disabilities? No. Students with disabilities are general education students first. So they're general education students with special needs. And like all general education students, students with disabilities have the same graduation requirements, the same course and credit requirements as their non-disabled peers. Any change to graduation requirements only for students with disabilities could potentially violate many federal laws, the Individuals with Disabilities Education, Elementary and Secondary Education, and Section 504 of the ADEA. So I'm going to pass it over to Alyssa.
All right, I think we're in the weeds part. You've just gotten an overview of graduation, and what I'd like to do now is break it down at the different levels, federal and local, as well as organizational bodies. So we'll start first with the federal law that oversees everything having to do with instruction for students with disabilities. I'm talking about the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or the IDEA. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that acronym, so I'll continue to use it and hopefully it will be right up there. The IDEA is a comprehensive federal law. It's also a complex federal law that governs the provision of special education and related services for children with disabilities aged birth to 22. So at the department, we are focused mainly on ages 3 through 22, school age. The IDEA ensures that all students with disabilities are provided with a free and appropriate public education. We call that FAPE, but for the purposes of our presentation today, I'll refer to FAPE as special education and related services. The IDEA emphasizes that special education and related services must be designed to meet the unique needs of students with disabilities and prepare them for post-school life. And we are talking specifically about higher education, employment, and independent living. We really want to focus on supporting students with disabilities and being engaged, productive citizens after they exit. Free appropriate public education includes specially designed instruction and related services. These services need to be provided in the least restrictive educational environment. They need to be provided in conformity with a student's individualized education program or an IEP. And most importantly, they need to be provided at no cost to the parent. They are free. Next slide, please. All right, now let's talk about the federal regulations and graduation. The IDEA does not set graduation requirements. It defers to the ESEA, the Elementary, Secondary, and Education Act. It does, however, identify that a regular high school diploma is a diploma that is aligned with the state academic standards and has met state and local district requirements. It also says that special education services end either when the student with a disability graduates with a regular high school diploma or a student ages out. And what we mean by aging out is they are attending school until the end of the school year in which the student turns 22. In Arizona, we're slightly longer than what the federal law requires. And that is whether or not the student with a disability has earned a regular high school diploma. That is when the federal entitlement ends. So we have two options there. You either graduate with a diploma and that ends your services, that ends your entitlement, or you don't earn a diploma and you continue on until the end of the school year in which you turn 22. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're at the state and local levels. We're going to start first with the Arizona state statutes, which are pretty prescriptive. First, the state statutes direct the Arizona State Board of Education to develop a minimum course of study, incorporating the state standards that lead to graduation. And they're also to prescribe competency requirements for the graduation of pupils from high school, regular high school diploma, incorporating the standards in the areas of reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. So there's specific areas, and we'll get into that in a moment. They also direct local school governing boards to go further into prescribing graduation. Local school governing boards are required to prescribe curriculum, incorporating the standards in the required subject areas we just discussed, as well as the criteria for graduation from high school, which may be in addition to or higher than what the State Board of Education requires. The local school governing boards can also prescribe competency requirements required for students to graduate. And then finally, we're at the teacher level, the classroom level. The statutes direct teachers to determine whether a student passes or fails a particular course that's intended to lead toward graduation credit. Next slide, please. So let's break this down a little bit further. First, we start with the Arizona State Board of Education. You guys, in previous versions, have established 22 required credits as the minimum number of credits needed for graduation. They're in the specific areas of English, or English as a second language, social studies, math, science, the arts, or career and technical education, or elective courses. And you can see the number of credits that are required in each area. So some of the confusion sometimes is that we hear is that graduation can be any number of credits in any of these areas, but it's pretty specific what the state board has set forth. Next slide. Now we move to the local school governing boards. And as we've referenced previously, the boards are responsible for adopting a curriculum that's aligned with the standards, approving courses that are aligned with the adopted curriculum. They also have to approve special education policies and procedures for the schools that they represent. This is not necessarily specific to graduation, but it is an important requirement. They have to determine the graduation requirements and courses necessary for students to graduate, and they are responsible for issuing regular high school diplomas. Next slide. Also, staying with the local school governing boards, graduation requirements and courses to receive a diploma must meet the minimum graduation requirements set by the State Board of Education. However, local school governing boards can prescribe additional course and competency requirements that go above and beyond what the State Board of Education has set. However, local school governing boards do not have the authority to set different graduation requirements for students with disabilities, such as requirements that lower the credits, that don't include all of the required areas. It needs to be consistent with what is expected for all students. Local school governing boards also do not have the authority to prescribe an alternative or a special education curriculum. This is an area of confusion that we hear about as well. Next slide. Okay, now we're at the IEP level. So this is the individualized education program level. This is the level that gets down into the classroom, to the school and the classroom, and that talks about what the student is going to receive in terms of services. IEP teams operate at the local level. They develop and they implement a plan that is reasonably calculated to provide the student with the specialized services and instructions that allow the student access to the general curriculum. So again, we're referring to the same curriculum that's available to all students. IEP teams also have an important function when a child reaches transition age. They have to implement a post-secondary transition plan starting no later than the IEP in effect when the student turns 16. And we're going to talk about that in the next slide. So in terms of the post-secondary transition plan, the IEP must include two big concepts. The first are appropriate, measurable post-secondary goals. We call them MPGs, based upon age-appropriate transition assessments. And these are related to the post-school areas that we described earlier: training, education, employment, and where appropriate, independent living skills. And when we talk about independent living skills, we mean activities of daily living, how to do hygiene, how to access transportation, that sort of thing. The second part of post-secondary transition plan is very important. It is the transition services and activities, which could include courses of study related specifically to transition, needed to assist the student in order to reach those goals, those measurable post-secondary goals. I want to point out that those courses of study are not the same as the academic courses of study that are required for graduation. The transition plan occurs at the same time as the student's coursework toward graduation. That is what the federal law intends, and it cannot be delayed until after the coursework toward graduation requirements has been completed. One of the areas of misunderstanding that we hear is, that Colette referenced earlier, is the graduation requirements, the academic coursework that's laid out by the State Board of Education is in a different set of expectations than the transition requirements that are laid out by federal regulations. Those transition requirements, those activities, those goals, those preparatory activities that we're trying to help students with so that they can achieve post-school outcomes that are what we all want for our kids, those are different. They are critical. They need to be provided to a child before they graduate, because when they graduate, their entitlement to federal services ends. And that is why they need to be incorporated at the same time as the academic coursework. Next slide. Now let's talk about what IEP teams can and cannot do. IEP teams do have the authority to talk about how a student will meet graduation requirements. They can determine the sequence of courses. They can talk about the classes the student will take in order to meet the minimum competency requirements, as long as the classes are aligned to the state standards. So an example might be an IEP team could say, normally it takes 1 year to achieve a full English language arts credit, and a student with a disability is going to do this over 2 years or over 1.5 years, which would give them more time to demonstrate mastery. However, IEP teams do not have the authority to prescribe or change the school's graduation requirements for students with disabilities. And I'd like to point out that this IEP team oversight was specifically addressed in the letter to White that Colette talked about earlier. There's real concern by the federal government that if IEP teams make these decisions, they will make them inconsistent with all the federal regulations that govern what needs to be provided to students with disabilities. IEP teams also do not have the authority to determine if courses meet the criteria for graduation, and they do not have the authority to postpone implementation of a transition plan or withhold transition services to extend a student's graduation date. Next slide, please. So where does this leave us? We have some opportunities. I'm hoping the board will consider this first one. The board some time ago, Director Ross, I'm not trying to remember exactly when, but it was sometime within the last year, requested that the Special Education Advisory Panel discuss lowering the age of transition from 16 to something lower. The Special Education Advisory Panel is an independent, federally authorized body of diverse stakeholders who are informed and able to make decisions about unmet needs for students with disabilities in the state. So we call this panel CAP. CAP met, talked about this in depth, reviewed the pros and cons, looked at what was happening in other states, and determined that their recommendation would be to lower the age of transition to start by the end of a student's freshman year. So instead of junior year, which is about the time a student turns 16, we're talking about freshman year. By doing that, there will be more opportunities for parents and schools to talk about graduation. As you can imagine, waiting until junior year, that's pretty late in the game. It also provides additional time to incorporate those transition services into the courses of study. Again, if we're waiting to try and do that by junior year, it's really, really late and difficult to do. And it also provides additional time for us to engage adult service agencies. And when I'm talking about adult service agencies, I mean vocational rehabilitation, the Division of Developmental Disabilities, these types of agencies that can provide services to students with disabilities that will help them transition into adult life. Next slide. And I also wanted to end by talking about the services that are provided by the Arizona Department of Education. I work in exceptional student services, and for as long as I've been at the department, which feels like many, many, many years, because it has been, we have had a robust team of secondary transition specialists. Their whole job is to focus on best practices in supporting students with disabilities in transitioning to adult life. They look at the research, they consult with national technical assistance groups, they work with other areas within exceptional student services, but truly their whole job is to support students with disabilities getting out into adult life and being successful citizens. The department also has supports through its programmatic monitoring team. One of our big responsibilities under federal regulations is to audit schools to ensure that what they're providing in terms of special education and related services is consistent with what's required in the federal regulations. So this team also provides a lot of valuable training and technical assistance to schools. And then finally, we will continue to do the things that we normally do, which include training and technical assistance specific to graduation. We've been doing this for, 2 decades. It's been a long time. We kind of cycle through. We've had several iterations of documents. But in 2020, we produced the most recent resource documents that are available. The FAQ document the board received in advance of this meeting. And there's also an FAQ document that's been translated into parent-friendly language. The department will also continue communication and training with agency partners through the Arizona Community of Practice on Transition, and that's vocational rehabilitation, Division of Developmental Disabilities, Access, behavioral health, all of the agencies that need to be involved in promoting seamless transition. And then finally, we are going to continue the partnership with Raising Special Kids, which is the Parent Training and Information Center that is funded by the U.S. Department of Education to help support parent needs for parents of students with disabilities. We partner with them to create documents in parent-friendly language, but also to provide training and parent-friendly webinars. And this concludes our presentation, but I just wanted to say, this is an area of intense focus. It has been over the years. Graduation is an important topic for parents. We just talked about that today because it's graduation season. I have high school students of my own. I'm very invested in seeing them reach this milestone. And we know that it's an emotional topic because we want our students with disabilities to have access to the same opportunities and to be successful post-school. So this is really one of the most important things that we can support at the department. Now we're open for questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Thank you to you both. I suspect there may be some questions or comments. Any of my colleagues? Member Kravickas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Alyssa and Colette, for coming. My first technical question is on slide 18, where it says that the transition plan occurs at the same time as the student's coursework. You, in your comments, you said that's what federal law intends, but it's not in the law, correct?
It is in the law. The law says that graduation requirements are set by the state. The state has not included those transition service activities that are included in the federal regulations as part of the graduation requirements. So the intention comes from the deferral of graduation requirements to the state, and the state not including those in its regular high school diploma option. I would note that in most cases, diploma options need to be available to all students. So it may or may not be realistic to include transition services into the graduation requirements for all students.
Yes, I agree with that. And I'll put a pin in that for a second.
Right.
But I guess what I'm confused about then, so have other states put transition? And I know some states have special ed diplomas, about half do, maybe we do not. And I'm certainly not suggesting that. Because on the same time, the letter to White, to your point, clearly says that you can't have separate. So how do we reconcile that?
That is an excellent question, Member Krivickas. I think my first comment is, you are right. There are many other states with many other diploma options. I'm unclear. Well, let me just say, the diploma options could be vocational diplomas, they could be arts diplomas, they could be STEM diplomas. I think I've seen many, many iterations. I'm not clear whether all of the diploma options meet the requirements of the federal government. So that's kind of thing A. I know in talking to my state colleagues that there's a certain level of scrutiny that states are under right now related to graduation for students with disabilities and high school requirements. Even in our state plan this year, when we submitted it in February, we were asked to clarify that there's only one diploma option for students with disabilities. In terms of how do we solve this problem, I think we solve this problem by engaging general education administration and helping them better understand how to weave and incorporate transition requirements and even what those are into the courses of study. I really think that's an opportunity that we need to take.
I appreciate that. And I would agree with that. I think the other tension point is LRE. Because quite frankly, all of the parents that I've heard from that spoke at the legislature are parents of kids with significant disabilities.
Sure.
So I have one with very high incidence, one with very low incidence. For a child with ADD, it's very easy to envision transition activities embedded, filling out college applications. For a student with significant disability, I can't imagine that. I've had 3 transition meetings on my own this year. How to do that with that, especially when we are fighting so hard to keep her in gen ed classes. And I thank you for noting though that we can extend credits, because I know that's an idea a lot of districts are toying with.
Yes.
Again, I support all options, but that's going to be a very non-inclusive environment as well. So let me just go to a question, because I had to write it down because I knew I'd forget.
Sure.
So slide 6 says that when graduation requirements are met, a regular high school diploma is awarded to the student, but it doesn't say when. You also note, as did Superintendent Horn in his comments, that the state doesn't issue diplomas, nor has the authority regarding the timing of graduation decisions. However, we heard from advocates, attorneys, and parents last month that schools have been instructed that if their students with disabilities have completed the necessary credits, they must be issued a diploma, regardless of they've reserved transition services, but we'll put that on the side for a sec since we kind of just covered that, and regardless of they're ready. I've also heard from schools that they've been informed that they will not receive funding, either ADM or federal funding, if they don't. And my question is, that's not a special ed issue. We know typical students who may have all their graduation requirements met by the end of junior year. Probably some of the kids on our high flyers on our advisory panel, right? Who come back senior year to take 6 AP courses, be on the yearbook committee, and be the quarterback of the football team. Mm-hmm. So that's my biggest question, is it's this timing issue, because it's not a special ed issue. So I'll let you address it and then I'll follow up.
Member Krivickas, there are many parts to that question. So I'm
just
going
the timing really is like,
okay,
because our rule's silent on it.
Well, to start with, when the coursework and credits in the required areas have been completed, graduation occurs. And I think that's been a misunderstanding previously. That means that schools really need to be thoughtful about how they're planning the courses of study and incorporating the transition services during that process. So that's really the answer. The answer is, once the coursework has been completed, graduation happens. It's not as simple as holding back a diploma and then pushing them on for transition services, because as we've talked about in the presentation, once the diploma happens, the entitlement to special
Right.
education services in the IDEA ends.
Hence why it's important,
Right,
sensitive.
which is why we
Yeah.
really want it to be a thoughtful decision that IEP teams make in consultation, in collaboration with their local administrators, with their curriculum developers, with their counselors, all the people who are involved in determining a course of study for a particular school.
Okay, thank you. But let's put special ed aside again. If the LEAs or PEAs have the authority to issue diplomas and decide timing, how are we enforcing, if I'm understanding you correctly, is the state somehow saying that every student in Arizona, the second they get their graduation requirements met, they're done and they have to be done? Again, not a special ed question, but just because that's state law. That's not even an IDEA thing. This is state law. And I know that, especially given the work that we did on the Goodwill issue, the adult stuff a couple of years ago, ADM has been extended to 22. And state law says that students with IEPs can stay till 22. So you can see why there's just kind of confusion out there, where it seems very clear that they can stay, but yet they're being told that as soon as their requirements are met, they're done.
Member Kravickas, I think I have to revert to the state statute regarding instructional time and the definition of a student. And it talks about instructional time and the proportion of instructional time that's provided as being associated with the enrollment of a student, and the enrollment of a student and the attendance of a student participating in that instructional time is what leads to funding. So I have to kind of step back and say, for any student, my assumption, although I'm certainly not the graduation expert for all, my assumption would be that when a student has completed their course of study required by the State Board of Education and their local governing board, they have indeed graduated. And I'm unclear at that time how anything that they're participating in would be considered instruction per state statute that would be fundable. But, you know, I think that that's probably a bigger conversation that I would defer to school finance and audit.
I appreciate that. But I think we're getting to the core of the dispute. Again, not even a special ed issue. It's because, I mean, even if you look at the state data system, my understanding, and I know it's changed since last I was there, which is a while ago, in AZ Eds, I guess we call it now, let's say when Carla's issued a diploma, that's when they check the box of graduate and it goes into the data system. I don't think there's an automatic trigger that says when they've hit these credits, they're graduated, because again, a lot of kids graduate, I would say more at the end of first semester senior year, but I'm sure there are some at the end of junior year as well. And they stay and they take coursework, usually pretty high advanced coursework, because those are the kids that, you know, took summer classes and dual enrollment and all that other stuff, but they're still coming. I think that's the core of the question.
To your point, one of the things that we say when we present on graduation as special educators is we're not the graduation police. We're not going in and talking about and making decisions about whether graduation was appropriate. Those are not within our purview. But we do need to advise schools and teams where there might be risk. And that's really what we're talking about. Should you be claiming funding for a student who has considered graduating or graduated? And does that put your school at risk? And that would not be within my authority to investigate. I'm really wanting to ensure that the transition services, which we know are critical for post-school success, are provided. That's not only a significant compliance problem, it is an ethical and a practical problem, because we know that these are things that are going to prepare our kids in the best way. And we also know that we don't want them to potentially lose eligibility for services before that happens. So we're really focused on helping schools understand how to make decisions to incorporate both of those. And as you've said, it's not easy. We've got to consider educational environment. We've got to consider coursework. We've got to consider the staff that are needed to make this happen, and the bridging services that are provided by partner agencies like vocational rehabilitation. There are a lot of considerations.
Thank you. And I am sure, I think this is my last question because I know we all don't want to stay here, although I could talk about this stuff and get like excited about it. But I think the only thing I'm going to push back on you is I don't think they've graduated until the PEA has awarded a diploma. And I think that's maybe where there's room for some rule interpretation or amendment. But one of the things I'd love to add to the opportunities, if you look at nationally, like all of the funders and the ed reform organizations, the hot topic right now is pathways. Everybody's talking about pathways.
Yes.
I feel like the PEA, you know, in your worlds, PEAs really need clear pathways. Like you indicated that longer credit on what it could look like for a student with significant disabilities when the law is super clear that any child with an IEP, and there's no caveat, there's no criteria, you just have to have an IEP, can stay till 22. I don't think enough people know what that looks like. And of course, as you know, a lot of PAs don't, kids with significant disabilities are rare and few sometimes in some ways. So it's not something a lot of LEAs even have prepared for or know. So I think there's really a lot of room for, and I wouldn't even call it guidance, but for pathways. What are all the different options that that could look like? Because I shouldn't say just mine, but my daughter needs more time by definition of a developmental delay. She needs more time.
Member Krivickas, I think, you're absolutely right. And that is why the federal regulations give that time. It just has to be worked in properly with the requirements for graduation that are set at state and local levels. What I would say is we pulled some preliminary data at the department to see whether or not it was a statewide problem that students were being pushed out early by graduation with a regular high school diploma. And for the last several years, we've seen 15 to 20% each year who have been graduated but are in the second year of their 12th grade. So there may be pockets. Certainly there are always anecdotal experiences. There are places where this may be happening or the incorporation of transition and graduation requirements isn't working well. But I think many schools are taking advantage of that flexibility in scheduling in order to provide those transition services.
Thank you. I'm laughing only because, I mean, by and large, I don't know many high school students that want to stay longer.
Absolutely.
So I mean, to your point of like the small
You are
amount,
exactly right.
This is not like, oh, I really want to stay another year. It's a rare problem, but and this is anecdotal, but I've reached out for like a year to the parent communities, to Raising Special Kids, to Disability Rights Arizona, and it has been 99% of parents with Down syndrome. And it's emotional. And that's what's so frustrating. It seems to be a really unique issue to a certain population and very emotional, as you can tell from me now. I have parents reaching out to me all the time when they're telling them their schools are telling them they have to graduate. Now, again, I want to push back on one thing you just said. You said they were in their second semester and they've graduated, but stay on. How do you know they've graduated? Because ADE doesn't get transcript level data unless AZEDS has been significantly improved. I don't know about.
So students who are reported as graduated in AZEDS, that's the population that we were looking at, specifically students with disabilities. And the search that we did looked at how many years they had been in 12th grade. So whether it was their 4th year in their cohort or if it was their 5th year. And we actually found a higher percentage of students who were in their 2nd year of 12th grade than we would have expected, given the percentage of students who probably need that time because they have significant cognitive disabilities. So I agree with you. I do think that this is happening. We hear about it. We see it in state complaints. But I do think that schools are trying to do it right. They're trying to provide those services. We're not seeing a statewide epidemic, let's say, based on the data that's been reported.
Thank you. And I'll finish. I agree. It is a small proportion, but it's a very significant population.
Yes.
And I will let the board off the hook on the rest of it. But I would plead for coffee and, data meeting and dig deep into this, because I think it's interesting of when they're reported graduation. Because again, I think that particular policy applies to all students.
Sure.
And not just special ed. But thank you for coming down and talking with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Krivickas. Member Clark.
Member Krivickas, since we have them here, is there anything that we can do to support additional questions or research, additional data on this topic? Like you mentioned, which I think is valuable, that it seems to be negatively impacting the Down syndrome community more than maybe other communities? Like, is there any additional information that we can support you in asking about that? I mean, you just mentioned that you see it a lot in state complaints. We want.
We don't actually see a lot.
You don't see a lot in state complaints. So, well, we know that we're also not keeping track of state complaints once they're reconciled. We learned that in the special education evaluation subcommittee. So is there any additional information that you want to request now that we can support you on being presented to us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Member Clark. First, it would be an intellectual disability data-wise, not Down syndrome. Just to clarify that. I think it's going to be incumbent to the board to look at our rule and really defining what graduate means and when a diploma must be awarded. And again, I don't think that's a special ed one, but I think you've identified great areas of opportunities. I think there's other things that we had in the bill that could possibly go into rule, not all. But I would really love for the department to put clear pathways out. And again, not guidance, because those seem so compliance oriented, but almost like case studies of students and all the different opportunities. Because I mean, we are aware that, especially in rural Arizona, to our member Clay, districts who may only get a student with a significant disability once every 5 years, and they need that help even more than the big ones here. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Clay, question, comment?
Just a comment.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur. I just want to say thank you very much for the presentation. It was very thought-provoking, and I do believe that purposeful time needs to be taken on transition, earlier time for our students. And I just wanted to share a story with you. When I was a principal, one of my responsibilities was I oversaw the special ed department. And I remember being at a graduation, and one of my amazing students who was exceptional, I had said, "This is a great time for you. Are you ready to go?" And she said to me, and she started crying. This was on the field for graduation. She said, "I'm not ready. Nobody wants me, and I don't know where to go, and I don't know what to do." I'm just, and what that did for me is let me know that maybe she did everything. She checked the blocks in as far as academics, but getting out there, meeting employees, knowing what to do, she was not ready. So we had to purposely continue to work with her after she graduated to make sure she just didn't become an opportunity youth of Arizona. And I'm sure that she's not the only one. So I believe that this right here will definitely help us move forward and pull in those potential opportunity youth students out so that they can go ahead and do the things that they were meant to do in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. Anyone else? Once again, I thank you for the presentation and obviously the engagement from my colleagues. Thank you. So we are nearing the 2.5-hour mark without a break. And a man of my age, that is the actual breaking point. So I'm gonna call a 10-minute break, and we'll try to reconvene just as close to 11:30 as possible. Thank you so much. minute break. They just don't exist. All right. Fantastic. I appreciate everyone's cooperating, getting back. So I'm going to move us on to 5D. This is presentation and discussion of free and reduced lunch and how it is calculated and applied by the Arizona Department of Education. And I'll turn it to Director Ross to tee it up for us.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. This topic arose in particular out of last month's robust discussion about Title I and Title I funding, free and reduced lunch being such a large part of that. We received a number of questions from the field, from board members about free and reduced lunch and just wanting clarity and a better understanding of it. And so we invited the department to come and present. We're very thankful to have the department's CFO, Tim McCain, and then Chris Brown, Data Wonder. I don't really know Chris's title anymore, but Chris, are you part of the presentation?
I'm presenting.
Oh, okay. Well, Chris is there if we need him, but Tim McCain, who's the department's CFO.
Welcome, Tim. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, board members. Thank you for allowing us to come present to you this morning. I think it's still morning anyway. And I did bring a few people with me in case there's specific questions regarding the different things we talk about. So Linda Burrows, the DAS of Academic Standards, is here. She also oversees early childhood area. Also, the DAS of Health and Nutrition, Kara Alexander, is with us today, along with Chris Brown in his official title. You can write this down, Sean. Business Officer of Education Programs. There you go. And Assistant Director of Special Education. Yeah. He does a little everything, right? All right. You can go to the next slide. Maybe. There it is. All right. So just quick things that we're going to run through today. We're going to do some acronyms for you. So FRL versus FRPL. We'll talk about that for just a few moments. Then we're going to talk about how the FRL data is collected and how FRL percentage is calculated, along with talking about the early literacy grant, and then also the basic state aid group B weight. Those are areas where these numbers are used in funding. And then we'll have some time for some questions at the end. However, if you have questions as we go, feel free to ask questions as we go through. Next slide, please. So FRL versus FRPL. FRL means free and reduced lunch. The data that is collected for the free and reduced lunch is through the CNP web, which is the health and nutrition application that is that the schools then submit all their data to. I believe there's a new one in the works that is supposed to be done. I don't know where Kara's at. There she is. July what? July 1. They're finally going to get off some of our old systems and have something new for the schools to be able to submit to, and hopefully be a much better implementation of that. The free and reduced lunch is defined by the National School Lunch Program, and it is a percentage that is derived from a USDA calculation. So it's not a calculation that ADE just came up with. It's not a calculation that the state board came up with. It is actually from the federal government that they give us that calculation to do. An important part about free and reduced lunch, the FRL numbers, it is not student level. We don't collect the data on a student level. It is only at a school level aggregated counts. So when that information comes to us, it is school level only. Go to the next slide, please. So now we have FRPL, which is free and reduced price lunch. And this is separate from FRL. This is data that is submitted directly through AZEDS to the department. It uses school meal application, CNP direct certification, or alternative income form to identify individual students. So this is actually on a student level as it is submitted to AZEDS. This data is used by accountability for subgroup calculations, and it is part of the Group B weight funding calculation that we do at the department in school finance. Students are then submitted with an income eligibility 1 or income eligibility 2 indicator. Those are simply free for income eligibility 1, reduced for income eligibility 2.
Tim,
Next slide, please.
Tim, can I pause for a
Yes.
moment? Just
Yeah, go ahead.
We could go back, just in case there are folks who might be familiar. Could you very quickly explain AZEDs and then group, just what you're talking about when you're talking about Group B weight?
Sure. So AZEDS is the Arizona Education Data System, and it is just simply how the individual schools submit data on a student level to the department for us to generate funding. The data is also used all throughout the department for different factors, but it is how the data is submitted into the department for funding. The Group B is a weighting of each student. So you have the regular ADM that the students generate, and then they also have weightings based on SPED weightings, but there's also the K3 reading weights, the ELL weights, the FRPL weight, and also now a gifted weight that is part of the funding for each school district. Is that good? All right. Moving on, next slide. So there are 3 levels that the data is collected. One is for applications for school meals. That is directly for the National School Lunch Program. There's also direct certification where they can go in and search for the students, and they are directly certified for different factors. I'll let Kara speak to that if you have direct questions on direct certification that we can talk about later at the end. And then there's alternative income forms, and these are forms that use the same household size and income eligibility standards as the application for school meals, but these are for non-school meal applications. We'll move on. So next slide, please. The FRL percentage. This is based on the October National School Lunch Program claims for reimbursement. And that's important that it's based on October, so things can change throughout the year, but October is the time where that actual percentage is generated. It's calculated based on the number of participants eligible for free and reduced price meals divided by the sum of free plus reduced plus paid participants, and that even includes Head Start and preschool. So we gave you a quick definition of participants because some people have confused it with their enrollment or their fundable students, but it is not specifically that. It can often vary significantly from that. So it is participants are those who have access to the meals. Then you have another calculation that is the community eligibility program. We'll actually talk about that calculation at the very end because it is a reason for why some schools may have a different percentage than what in their own calculations than what they do in the FRL percentage. And then there's also the provision 2 and provision 3, and that percentage is on a base year. So that percentage carries over in their subsequent years that they're eligible for provision year and provision 2 and provision 3. And then the data is published yearly on the ADE Health and Nutrition website. You can go there today. You can go to az.gov. You can go to the Health and Nutrition website. You can find the free and reduced lunch percentage report. And it actually has all the calculations actually in there for you to be able to see also how those are done. Next slide, please. The free and reduced lunch percentage is used in various different grants. Title I, which Chris talked significantly about a month ago. It is used in ranking schools by poverty level for Title I. It is used for the early literacy grant, and it's used for E-rate. It's also used as part of the calculation for the Group B weighting for basic state aid. And we'll talk about how that's done here in just a few moments. And then it's also used by other state funding that may be dictated in statute or session law. So it does get used periodically for different items. Next slide. So the early literacy grant, this is one of the ways that schools are funded that is using the FRL percentage. ARS 15-24909 says that an eligible school means a public school with at least 90% of the students who are eligible for free and reduced price lunches under the National School Lunch and Child Nutrition Acts. So based on this statute, the early literacy grant must use the National School Lunch Program FRL percentage as it is published. Next slide, please. The early literacy grant is $12 million that's been appropriated by the state legislature annually. And the determination of which schools are awarded is based on that FRL percentage calculated by ADE. So any school that is 90% or more is eligible for the early literacy grant. Award amounts are then determined by using each school's percentage of the total K-3 average daily membership of the awarded sites. And we'll walk through a little sample of that here in just a moment. And then each school's percentage of that ADM is then multiplied by the 12 million to determine the award. Next slide, please. So here's just an example of the K-3, the early literacy grant. So this is an actual real example from this year. The total K-3 attending ADM for the awarded sites was 30,577.2919. And school A's attending K-3 ADM was 180.4043. When you divide that out, you get a 0.59% of the total K-3 attending ADM for the awarded sites. And when you multiply the 0.59% by the 12 million, you get the $70,799.32. So that's how the early literacy grant is funded to the schools that have more than 90% FRL percentage. Next slide, please. So the basic state aid group B weight, ARS 15901, FRPL, means students who meet the eligibility requirements established under the National School Lunch and Children Nutrition Acts. That's very similar to the other statute for free and reduced price lunch, or an equivalent measure recognized for participating in the federal free and reduced price lunch program and other school programs dependent on a poverty measure, including the community eligibility provision for which free and reduced price lunch data is not available. So with that, we determined that we could use two means to be able to fund the school districts. So if you go to the next slide, please. Beginning in the school year 2022-2023, this new Group B funding was added. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, the statute allows us to use a different way of determining the funding for them. So two calculations are used to determine the funding that is due to each district or charter. And the calculation, whichever calculation we do both of them for every school. Whichever one results in a higher funding rate, that is what we use to fund the school. If you go to the next slide, please. So here's an example. In calculation one, the FRL percentage from health and nutrition is multiplied by the overall average daily membership in each school. This gives us an ADM to use for the Group B. So example, School A has an FRL percentage of 65%. School A has an ADM, overall ADM of 1,053.53. The 1,053.53 is multiplied by the 65% to get us a 684.7945 ADM. Next slide, please. Calculation two. The average daily membership is calculated for each student who has been submitted with an income eligibility 1 or income eligibility 2. Then the ADM for all the students with this criteria are totaled for an ADM of all the students with an FRPL need. So example for School A again has 695 students who have been submitted with an FRPL need. Those 695 students generated an ADM of 653.456. Go to the next slide, please. So here's that example again. The FRPL ADM based on the FRL percentage was 684.7945. The FRPL ADM based on the AZEDS data, submitting with an income eligibility 1 or 2, equated to 653.456. Again, we take the highest number and we fund them based on the highest number. So the weighted ADM for Group B is 684.7945 times the Group B weight, which is 0.022, and it generates 15.0655 of weighted ADM to fund the school. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are some chances that there could be discrepancies between data that the schools have and what ADE actually has. And so these are just a few items that may cause some confusion or may cause some discrepancies between the data. The first one is that FRL. I'm so used to using FRPL in school finance that it just rolls off my tongue. FRL percentage data is based on the October school lunch claims. So as I mentioned before, data can change throughout the year, right? So they may get more students in November, December, January, whatever. But the data is based on that October number. So even though it may change throughout the year, that's the published percentage is the October school lunch claims. The second part is the community eligibility program schools. So I mentioned earlier that we would talk about the calculation. It's a little bit of a complicated calculation for community eligibility program schools. They use categorically eligible students, which are students, foster care students. Help me, Kara, what else? They're in categorically eligible. There you go. There you go. Access, SNAP benefits, all those students. They take those number of students, they divide it by the total participants, and then they are multiplied by 1.6. So that can be a very complicated way of looking at things. But also that FRL percentage is based on the year of eligibility. So if they are eligible, if they are in eligibility, community eligibility program, and they qualify for it at 80%, year 2, it's going to be 80%. Year 3, it's going to be 80%. Year 4, it's going to be 80%. Provision 2 and 3, very similar in the fact that the FRL percentage that is published is used on that base year. So the years following that they are still in provision 2 or 3, they are going to be published at that base year. The last part of this is that there may be some confusion between FRL and FRPL, because they seem to be very similar and they have similar acronyms, specifically because preschool students are excluded out of the FRPL where they are included in the FRL percentage. So those are some ways that things could be confusing. And that is all I have for you. And you can go to the next slide, which says questions. So I'm sure that you all have some questions regarding the FRL and FRPL.
Thank you. Any questions from my colleagues?
Dr. Kaur,
Yep,
so
please.
Member Meyerson had to exit the meeting, but before doing so, texted me some questions.
Oh, fantastic.
And so
Excellent.
this is Member Meyerson asking, this is through me. So she did ask a couple of questions. One would be, so Tim, you talked about the ability to go with the higher of the two, FRL, FRPL, and Group B weight. Is that available in other funding, something like the early literacy grant or things like that, or is it just limited to Group B weight?
Currently, it's just limited to Group B weight simply because of the way the statute is written. The early literacy grant, the way it is written, is specifically for the national school lunch percentage, the FRL percentage that is generated by Health and Nutrition.
A couple follow-up questions.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So Member Meyerson also asks, was there a change in the way that eligibility, that FRL was applied for the early literacy grant this year to determine eligibility? In that some schools that have historically been eligible for it for a number of years weren't, or vice versa. Were there changes made this year?
That's going to be one I'm going to call Linda up to see if she knows. Was there a change? There's not been any change.
So follow up. She's fast. She's a good texter. Would you? Is there a reason you all could think of as to why a school might have been eligible in previous years, would not be eligible this year, if according to the school's data, their FRL percentage has not changed?
I really can't speak to that without knowing specifics as to what there is. And I don't think Kara could probably speak without having specifics. Yeah.
I can follow up. Board staff can follow up. Yeah. One more question. Based on the presentation, FRL and FRPL both seem determined by self-reporting from schools. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then would you be able to speak just over generally to the process of how schools report? And then it sounds like maybe a change is coming that I don't know if the department's ready to speak to it yet or.
The reporting, I'll let Kara come up and talk about the FRL percentage reporting, but the FRPL percentage or FRPL numbers are submitted through AZEDS. Any student that has qualified as an income eligibility 1 or income eligibility 2 using either the school meal application, direct certification, or through the alternative income forms are then submitted through AZEDS with that income eligibility 1, income eligibility 2, which then is generated into the ADM for the FRPL Group B weight. Carrie, you want to come talk about? What about FRL? Your percentage, yes, your FRL.
Yeah, so I think we had a slide on that. The free and reduced lunch with the free students plus the reduced students divided by total participants, the free plus reduced and all others that would be eligible for a paid meal.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any more.
Superintendent Horn, Dr. Core, members of the board. Also, it's really nice to see you, Kara. Kara and I worked with the department together for a long time. I get is FRL, so it's also self-reported data from schools?
In the CNP web.
And then it's also beholden to the October 1 data or October data? It's the October data. Okay. And then are there processes by which a school can sort of appeal or rectify if they don't feel their data is calculated correctly?
In terms of the school meal claim, that's where we pull that from. They do have the ability to revise. There are certain conditions. If the meals have changed, usually it's about meals, not the eligibles. So if there were instances of that, we could discuss, but there's not a formal appeal process.
Okay. Superintendent Horn, Dr. Core, members of the board. I think that's all for Member Meyerson's questions.
Right. Thank you, Sean and Member Meyerson. Any other questions? Yeah, Member Clark.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. Thanks for your presentation. So is there ever an audit on what the schools are presenting since it's self-reporting on both sides? And if there is, what does that look like?
From an ADM audit, we do, this is new, actually, 22 is new. So it is something that they're going to be looking at. Sorry about that for those that were listening online. Our ADM audit team will be auditing to it to verify that the students that they are reporting with income eligibility 1 or 2 have the documentation to follow up with those. And they will be making adjustments on the ADM based on that if that is found to be an issue. I don't know what the follow-up is on health and nutrition side. Is there a follow-up for you guys to verify what they're submitting is valid?
We have annual verification.
Okay. They have an annual verification process for those students.
So with this audit, is it all of what's been submitted like per school? Is it like a random like assessment, a selection of schools?
Sure. It's a random sampling.
Okay.
Yep. It's a random sampling.
We're of like specific schools and then looking at like what they actually have on file. It's one of those 3 options, right? There's like the school meal application. There was 2 other ways.
Right.
So it's looking to see like, is the number that was reported in the system based on the random, like risk-based auditing accurate with what they actually have in hand?
Certainly. So yes. So they do select schools throughout the select districts. Yep. They do select districts. However, they do that based on risk or based on some concerns that we may have at ADE over a district, with reporting. And they will go in and yes, determine whether or not the documentation that they have on file supports whether or not that student should have had that need reported.
And then is there anywhere that information, like I'm not sure what the technical term would be, but like the error or percentage of, I don't want to say misuse because that's not the right term. Is there anywhere where the findings of those audits are then published?
Sure. It's actually on the ADE website. You can look up audit team, or I think it's just under audit. You can look up audit. Every one of their audits is published directly on the website. So you can always pull down those audits. Currently, I don't know that they have started doing the FRPL Group B weight percentage audits, simply because it's so very new.
Yeah.
And they're actually still working through their processes to determine that. But they do audit for other factors, and you can see how they do their audit and how that information is.
So just to clarify, it's risk-based auditing by district.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll thank you once again for your time and presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
On to update on rulemaking procedures for elementary and early childhood.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Just as a reminder for the board, but also for anybody who may be watching, as part of the rulemaking process, there's a requirement to a rule becomes before the board 3 times at least. One is to open, you all vote to open a rule. There's another time to update on the status of that rule, and then a vote to close the rule. So this item and the next item are both updates from our policy director, Rico Yanez, on the status of rulemaking packages. So Rico, item E.
Yes. Good afternoon, or it is almost afternoon, not quite. Good morning, President Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. I'll keep my comments short for both of these rulemaking packages, as there have not been any updates as of right now to the drafts from the previous meeting. But we held a public hearing for, or we're holding a public hearing for the elementary certificate and early childhood certificate on May 31st, Friday.
Thank you, Rico. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? No, then without any further ado, I'll move it right on with which is an update on rulemaking procedures for seizure management training. I'll kick it right back to Rico to update us there.
All right, thank you. The update here on the seizure management trainings is we held a public hearing on the 15th of May with Kat Ruiz, who helmed it. We only had one comment. It was in support of the rulemaking process, and we have not made any updates due to that.
Okay, any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, we'll complete the Rico hat trick then by going to 5G, which is presentation and discussion of legislative affairs. And the board may choose to take action to support, oppose, or remain neutral on specific legislative proposals. We're kind of in that quiet time legislatively. Rico, do you know anything we don't?
So we are in that quiet time. So if members have any questions, I'm available for questions. But otherwise, I just wanted to cover some good work that the board will be taking on over the interim ahead of the general effective date. So the foster care bill that we covered last week, I'll just provide a little bit more of an in-depth update. So this is the bill that required the board to implement a model policy or policy guidance framework for LEAs to consider when they are receiving a student based on a best interest determination placement. So as of right now, staff between me, Bruce, and Sean have started meeting with some of the stakeholder groups that worked on the bill, the Center for the Rights of Abused Children, and with the department team on their foster care division to start laying out a schedule for implementation on this. We're talking about stakeholders that we would like to include on the drafting of these resources. We have been gathering resources from various different groups and states that have done this work already. And the goal would be to provide a framework and a model policy for local districts to implement within their local context. It's not legally binding for them. It would be a policy guidance resource rather than a rule, but that would be up for this upcoming fall.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you, Rico, for the good work being done. I'll keep us moving and move us on to 5H. This is presentation and discussion and possible action regarding the recommendation to deny JT's appeal and approve the Arizona Department of Education's denial of eligibility for the Empowerment Scholarship account for appeal case number 00060. Again, that is the recommendation that has been presented to us. I'll seek a motion for the board to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law in the recommendation of the hearing officer to deny the parent and or guardian JT's appeal 0060. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Superintendent Horn, do I have a second? Member Clay?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted, thank you. So I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, with that, I will call the motion. All in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. We have one to send. Quick call. I think that's 6, right? 6-1.
Dr. Core, that is correct. 6-1.
Just thankful I did not need to take my shoes off to count that, but I so the motion carries with dissent noted from Member Clark. I will move us on to 5I. Presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the recommendation to approve the parent guardian's LVA's appeal to and reject the Arizona Department of Education's denial of a purchase of using Empowerment Scholarship account funds for appeal case 00083. Again, the recommendation here is to approve the appeal and reject the department's denial. So with that, I will seek a motion.
So moved.
Okay, Member Clark, do I have a second?
Second.
Member Haley, Vice President Haley, sorry. Any conversation or discussion? Superintendent Horn, please.
This is the hearing aid case, is that correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yeah, so our concern is not with the specifics of this parent, but with the question of precedent. We've tried to draw a line between educational services and health services, just like the public schools are not clinics. And we didn't get a decision from the hearing officer, which usually we get to inform the board. The hearing officer instructed us to negotiate or discuss to determine what part of the hearing aid pertain to the FM system as opposed to the hearing aid itself. No information has been provided to us or the hearing officer to support a division between those two things. As far as negotiations went, the request was for $1,800. We offered to meet the parent halfway, offered $900. The parent chose not to reject that and not make a counteroffer. And I think that I'd like to move an amendment to table this for 1 month, give us a chance to go back to the hearing officer and get a clarification as to get an actual recommendation. We have no recommendation from the hearing officers. I'm the first time I've ever seen anything like that. The hearing officer just told us to get together and try to work it out. We tried to get together. Our offer was not accepted and there was no response. And I think with another month, we could either work out with the parent what the actual cost of the hearing aid as associated to the FM system as opposed to the hearing aid itself, what that is, or if helpful to reach a conclusion, go back to the hearing officer and get an actual decision from the hearing officer advising the board what to do, which is the normal process and which should not occur in this case. So I move that we table it for 1 month and we'll come back next month, hopefully with either an agreement or or something from the hearing officer that the board can take into account.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor right now. So,
but I'm moving to amend it.
which would need to be agreed to by the folks who have made them. I'm no Robert's Rules expert, and that's on full display here. But my understanding is that would need to be acknowledged and agreed to by both the first and second, right?
Could we have, I don't agree to that as moving it. Is this an opportunity for me to have some discussion on this too? Would that be appropriate? Okay, thank you. So I think this is a really unfortunate situation, and I don't like that it's being characterized as some sort of dangerous precedent. There's a very small number of families that are on the Empowerment Scholarship Account program that have hearing impairment. Those families are doing more with less dollars, and they're managing those funds well. The parent we heard from earlier testified, and I'm reading from the agenda, that the hearing aids contain receivers that allow the student to hear the teacher. ESA approved expenses are assistive technology. So I believe that the characterization of this as a medical device is incorrect in this situation. The microphone delivers the voice through an FM system and allows the student to hear the lesson that is being presented. I think that this is clearly assistive technology. It's a receiver for a sound that's inside of a hearing aid. Again, state rule says, let me read it here, R72-1505B4, that associated goods and services, a lot there, but essentially are approved, and the department may approve assistive technology items with an IEP, an evaluation, or a letter from a qualified service provider. So again, I think we need to look at this specific individual case and situation. We heard from the parent earlier today. They are awaiting, they have spent $2,200 on a device that allows the student to hear what the teacher is saying. We have the ability right now to allow that reimbursement out of their own ESA account to occur. And I think that we should do that. I don't think kicking this back to another hearing officer or delaying, again, giving the department another month to come up with a resolution, which I understand there was already some delays even in those meetings to begin with, is the right decision to make today for this particular student. So just bringing it down to this individual situation, I really want to encourage my fellow board members to support the motion.
Please,
Could Maria Sims please come forward to comment? It's a case that she handled.
Sure. Yeah. If we think that would inform the members' understanding, please.
Thank you. Thank you, members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm Maria Sims. I'm the Associate Superintendent for Legal Services at the department. And I handled this case with the ESA team. We don't take issue with anything that Member Clark is saying today about covering the cost of the receiver. That is what the hearing officer recommended. There is no price determined right now, so we don't have the amount of the cost of the receiver determined. We did get a letter from an audiologist that said receivers cost about $900, but we didn't get any documentation or verification. We do know that the parents submitted the hearing aids as a medical device to their health insurer, and the health insurer covered half of the hearing aid device. So now we're left with determining what portion, as the hearing officer recommended, of that hearing aid is the receiver for the FM system. And so we were told by the audiologist they run about $900. We don't know if that's total or if that's each ear. We know that the insurance company paid for half of that expense with the hearing aid. So that's why we offered $900. But that offer was rejected. And so now we're left with the recommendation that the three of us should work it out. But if you adopt the recommendation, that still will not give us the number that we should be covering, given that we're trying to parse out the assistive technology portion of a medical device, the FM receiver, and what portion of that the parent had to pay for that should be reimbursed, because we know half of the hearing aids were reimbursed by insurance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
have a comment.
Yeah, please, Member Clark, absolutely.
So the $2,216.28 was after insurance, correct? Yes, okay. So my comments still stand. I think that what we're trying to do is say, oh, this small little bit of technology that is the receiver, which is actually part of the entire piece of the hearing aid, which is assistive technology, so this child can hear the teacher, that it's all wrapped in together. I think trying to, I'm glad there's a letter from an audiologist that we don't have in front of us that says it's about $900. In this particular case, insurance has picked up some already, which I'm not sure if everyone might be aware of this, but the law did change several years ago that allowed insurance to be used in conjunction with ESAs. So, for example, if your child has a speech language delay and your insurance covers speech language therapy services, you're allowed to have that therapy appointment hit your insurance and then pay the difference with an ESA. That is exactly what I think is happening here. And again, I think this is a very specific situation that's been unfortunately dragged out for the parent and the student. And I still encourage board members to support the motion.
Thank you, Member Clark. Any other comments? Member Krivickas, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Maria, so you can confirm that the 2,200 is what insurance did not cover.
Correct. And if I just might add, did submit a letter to the board on May 16th. And if you look at Exhibit 4, that is the letter from the audiologist. Thank you. Oh.
Yeah, we heard you. Thanks. Any other thoughts or questions? Executive Director Ross, yeah.
So Dr. Clore, just Superintendent Horn, members of the board, just to clarify process.
Yeah, please.
So there was a motion made to adopt the recommendation as it stands in the agenda, which is to reimburse the family in the amount of $2,216.28. So there was a motion, there was a second, which opened discussion. During the second, Superintendent Horn put forward an amendment. Superintendent Horn, just to clarify, because the amendment kind of had two pieces to it. It can be an amendment to table the discussion until June, giving both parties more time, or it can be an amendment to send the case back to the hearing officer to determine an amount. We just need to clarify so that the board can vote on what it is you were.
Right. I think the idea was to do both, to give us a month, and if they can justify how much is the receiver, we have an agreement. If not, let us go back to the hearing officer, get a recommendation from the hearing officer. When I was in the legislature, we used to make amendments all the time that the sponsor of the bill didn't like. I guess this is a different procedure that we have.
Dr. Clore, Superintendent Horn, not a different procedure. It's just that it's not common to have an amendment where there's like a contingency built into it. What it would be then is tabling the item until June, and then the item would return in June, either settled, or then there would have to be another vote about potentially sending it to the hearing officer. So I just want to, I would want you to just clarify your motion for the board.
Yeah, my motion is to table for 1 month and come back.
May I make one point of clarification? Thank you. So Mr. Ross said that the recommendation was for $2,200. That is not, as I read it, the recommendation of the hearing officer. The recommendation of the hearing officer was for ADE, the parent, in coordination with the audiologist, to come up with an amount that represents the cost of just the receiver portion of the hearing aid. That is the proposal. Am I correct?
Dr. Clore, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, to clarify, the board has full authority in this space. A recommendation from a hearing officer is a recommendation. It's similar to like a subcommittee recommendation. It's to be taken into account. However, the board has the authority to grant the full refund, pick its own number, or table the discussion till June, send it back to a hearing officer. So the board has full authority in this space.
Thank you, Executive Director Ross. And just to be perfectly clear with my colleagues, the recommendation of this board, the motion on the table right now is for the reimbursement in the amount of $2,216.28, which represents the non-insurance compensated amount in question. Just super important everyone understand that when I was referring to recommendation, that is now a motion that we're acting on. Just so we're clear.
Yep.
Now, again, I'm going to go, if you'll indulge me, Superintendent, the motion, the amendment is to table for a month. Does that need approval by those making the motion, or is that a vote by the board? If you could help me clarify that, Executive Director Ross, I'd be grateful.
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, there would need to be a board vote to accept the amendment.
A board vote. Okay.
Yes, so that does have to be voted upon. And then if it is accepted, then there would be a vote, another full vote. If it's not, it would go back to the motion.
Okay, and same bylaws apply that this would require 6 of the 7 of us to approve the amendment as presented.
Dr. Corr, that is correct.
Okay. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate the indulgence of my colleagues as I muddle through this. So we have an amendment to table for a month, given kind of just the 7 of us left. If we could do this as a roll call vote, Executive Director Ross, I would appreciate that. Oh, yes, please.
If 6 out of 7 are needed to adopt the amendment, it's obvious that I wouldn't have that. So I'll withdraw the amendment and I'll just ask anyone who agrees with me to vote no on the motion.
Okay. Just when I had it figured out, Tom, you did that to me. Okay, fair enough.
I have one more comment is before we go into a vote, if you would
Please,
indulge me
please.
also. The only other thing I want to remind is in this very specific situation that another board member reminded me of before is that presently right now in law and in rule, there is nowhere that medical devices are prohibited. So my additional argument to kind of strengthen my hope for your support is that the only place that medical devices have been prohibited is in the ESA handbook, and that was added in several years ago. So I believe this is very clearly assistive technology, but I point that out just for additional support that nowhere in rule or statute are medical devices prohibited. Thank you.
Very, very good. Member Clark, thank you. So the motion is to accept the appeal and reject the department's findings. We have a motion. It's been seconded. And Executive Director Ross, if you could call a roll on this, I think we can move on.
Dr. Corr?
Yes.
Vice President Haley?
Yes.
Superintendent Horn?
No.
Member Clark?
Yes.
Dr. Clay?
Yes.
Dr. Hagerman?
No.
Member Kravickas?
May I explain my vote?
Of course, always, please.
I want to remind everybody who's watching and listening that we are trying to implement a program that's never been done before in our country. A couple states behind us now, but we are forging new ground. And to show all of us some grace, as the board doesn't make the law, nor does the department, and we're all trying to implement it. So I want to throw that out there because this is unfortunately an issue where she's correct. It's not in law and it's not in rule. And I think, I'm guessing there's staff out there that are keeping a running list of things that need to be fixed one day in law and rule. And I think this goes on that list. But with that, I vote yes.
Okay, that 5-2, so the motion does not pass as presented. Again, a reminder that it's always a majority of quorum of the entire board that is needed to pass. So here we are in a bit of limbo, and I would suggest that we might make an alternative motion to bring. Well, we have a couple options. One is to bring this back in June. It clearly has to be resolved one way or another. So I'm open to thoughts and a motion to the desires of at least 6 of us. Superintendent Horn.
I would think Sean could bring it back next month on his own. Do you need a vote for that?
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, There is actually in rule a requirement that the rulings from hearings be presented to the board within 2 board meetings, which is why it is on this agenda. So we would need a vote to table it till June.
So maybe to help direct this, do I have a motion for the board to table this item until June to give the parties more time to arrive at agreed upon amount for reimbursement?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Clay and Superintendent Horn right after. That motion is now on the table. Any discussion or comment?
I have comment.
Dr. Clay, please.
This issue is so gray. I mean, this will still set a precedence on what we do. Unfortunately, anytime I hear that it's an organization against a person, sometimes you always go with the person, but at the same time, whatever we do has to be good for everyone else, anybody else. So that's why, to me, we need to table it and we need to get more information so that our vote is clearer, because I see both sides. I really do. All right. But I know that if it goes forward, then everybody has to do it. Okay. It's just a lot of gray. And I believe that when there's a lot of gray, that this is something that we need to sit back and think about and talk about. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Member Krivickas, please.
Just a clarification of where we are.
Yeah.
So if we were to do nothing, the family is not getting reimbursed, correct? I'm kind of confused.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, Member Krivickas, the motion currently on the table is for the board is to table the item till June to give the department, the family, and the audiologist time to arrive as called for by the hearing officer originally, a time to arrive at consensus. So it would be giving more time for negotiation. So the item will come back in June, either with a recommended number, or if they were unable to come to recommendation, then it would be the board, this exact vote again.
Sure. Any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. So I guess let's go ahead and do a quick roll.
Just to reiterate, this is a vote to table the item until June to give the parties more time to negotiate. President Core.
Yes.
Vice President Haley.
May I explain my vote? I vote yes. I vote yes, but also I would like the department to work in good faith with the parent and the audiologist based on the information that was presented to us. It did not seem that all parties gathered together to negotiate. It was information that was provided to, and the parents then responded. So I would encourage the department to work in good faith with the family as well as the audiologist. So I vote yes.
Superintendent Horn.
I vote yes, and of course we will follow that.
Member Clark.
Yes.
Dr. Clay.
Yes, and I'd like to explain my vote. Again, full collaboration, full disclosure, and that everybody at the table has to be equal. The family cannot feel that it's the system against them. So I'm trusting that this conversation will definitely be equal across the table. Thank you. I vote yes.
Dr. Hagerman.
Yes.
And Member Krivickas.
Yes.
Dr. Core, the motion passes.
Motion carries. Thank you so much. And my thanks to my colleagues. I will move us on to item 6, which is again called to the public. This is time for the public to comment on items on today's consent portion of the enforcement actions. Once again, speakers will be asked to limit their comments to 2 minutes. Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we do not have any requests to speak for this call to the public.
Okay, then I will move us right on to item 7. This is the consent agenda for enforcement actions. If it meets with my colleagues' approval, we can take the entire consent agenda for enforcement actions in a single motion. Of course, if you wish to have anything pulled from this, we're able to do that. So I'll give you a second to take a look at those. And we'll ask if any of my colleagues would like anything from the consent agenda pulled. Hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve items 7A1 through 7A15, 7B1 through 7B3, as well as 7C1? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Clark, do I have a second?
Second.
But that was close. I'm going to go Dr. Clay. Any discussion or conversation needed? Okay, then I think we can do a voice vote here. All in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Move us on now to the final call to the public. This is item 8. This is the time for the public to comment on items on the general session portion of the enforcement actions. Once again, I'll ask speakers to limit their comments to 2 minutes. Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we do have requests to speak, and just to inform the board, speakers are limited to 2 minutes unless another arrangement has been made
Sure.
as needed for some speakers. So up first, we will have Eric Cardenas.
Hi, my name is Eric Cardenas. I'm here to report about Carrie Grimmer bullying everyone at school. Everyone knows that she's a bully. Before November 4th, 2022, everyone at PDSD was like a home to me. I loved going to school. I loved being in an environment where everyone can sign and people are deaf like me. I used to feel so safe there. On November 4th, Carrie came into my classroom and she started screaming at my friend, using her voice and using her hands in ASL. She called him names and told him to act normal, and Caden could not control it. We all know that he makes sounds and movements that he can't control. My mom and other moms from the class complained to the school and spoke out against the teacher. After that point, she would stare me down with my friends in the cafeteria, continuously looking at us. I began to feel unsafe at school, and my parents started to keep me home when I would tell them that I didn't feel safe going. It got so bad that safety plans had to be developed, but honestly, even with those safety plans in place, Carrie and Jill would break them and I wouldn't feel safe anymore. I spoke previously at an ASDB board meeting and they did not help. I don't want to leave PDSD. I want it to be a safe place again, but my mom did remove me from the school in April. Please, please don't let Carrie around deaf kids again. We don't deserve that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Jerry Watson, who I believe is with us virtually.
Got it. Yeah.
Hi. Okay. So I'm Jerry Watson. I used to be a teacher at PDSD. I met Jerry when I was an intern there. I already was told and knew that she liked to talk about other people. She definitely had the personality where she liked to know what everyone was up to on campus. When I became a teacher there, teaching 3rd grade, there were some times where I wouldn't have students in my classroom And at that time, a lot of teachers around would use that time to come in and we'd connect with each other about how we did not feel supported with Jerry. And honestly, there was nothing we could do about it. As a first year teacher, I'm so new to an area and really getting my bearings. So when I was hired as a 3rd to 5th grade teacher, I would go in there and sometimes I would ask, I would go into meetings with my colleagues and I would notice that Jerry particularly would not use sign language fluently in those meetings to the point where I was not understanding. When I reached out for clarification, she continued to just speak and not use her ASL clearly and it felt like it was to keep me out of the meetings. And when I confronted her about it, she was just frustrated. I one time tried to enter her classroom and was told I had to wait because a maintenance person was being yelled at in there. I couldn't hear that it was happening. So I was told by a hearing colleague that I needed to wait outside the room until the maintenance man was done being berated. So I know that this teacher doesn't have much patience for noises, which is hard when you're working in a deaf school. So I've been a neighboring teacher next to her, and I've seen her come into a classroom before and start yelling at the students to stop making so much noise. And I think it's strange because it's a deaf school, and we all know culturally that the background noise is a lot louder there. So honestly, as a young deaf child myself, it was an intense process to even figure out how loud my voice was while I was speaking. It's not something that deaf children develop right away. So her environment that she developed in that department made all of the deaf teachers uncomfortable. And I could only stay there for 1 year before I felt I had to move. And honestly, the deaf teachers turnaround compared to the hearing teachers turnaround in this department is not the same. Hearing teachers stick around and feel supported. And at the deaf school, the deaf teachers are coming in and leaving pretty soon after they're hired because it's not really a deaf environment. This is an environment where we should be able to feel like we're thriving, where really our students who are deaf are able to grow and gain the education that they deserve. Bottom line is this teacher obviously does not have a heart or honestly enough education on how to accommodate and work with deaf and hard of hearing students. And I just feel so incredibly frustrated by the system because I know that there are so many other teachers and students that want to be able to grow and thrive there that don't feel safe anymore around her. And it's not an environment that you can grow in. I know for a fact that some people don't feel comfortable working there because of the fact that they will share their feelings and then this teacher will use what they have said against them. And she will let everybody know that she has connections in administration and higher up in the Department of Education so that we are not able to feel that we can even get any sort of system of consequences or process to get her to have any sort of consequences for her actions. Honestly, I'm really just here to make sure that we have an environment where students can grow, and that's all.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Amy Young.
Good afternoon. I'd like you guys to put yourself in my shoes just for a moment. Imagine uprooting your family to the Phoenix area to ensure your son gets the best education by enrolling him into Phoenix Day School for the Deaf. Very shortly after his arrival, he came home in tears because of Carrie. He tells you what happened to his best friend in the incident that he witnessed firsthand. Mind you, PTSD is supposed to be the one place where our children can feel included and belong. It's their world, their deaf culture, and it was ripped away from him. The boy who refused to leave when we took a tour of the campus now refused to attend. We had to pull him out of school because of his safety plan was broken so many times. Instead of the school or Carrie asking us to sit down and discuss what happened, they just continued to ignore us and act like nothing had occurred. This is why the situation escalated so quickly. Our concerns were ignored, and only when we took the matter to social media did the school finally respond and implement a school safety plan for our children. There should never be a need for a safety plan between a student and a teacher. This in itself is wrong. Carrie should have not been allowed to put another child in such a vulnerable position ever again. I'm asking you board members to consider how would you feel if this was your deaf child? Would you continue to allow them to be bullied by a teacher? Would you fight for them? Would you let them stay there? How would you feel if it was your son? Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Marcy Berenberg, followed by Raul Cardenas.
Hi, I thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Hold on one second. There we go.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak again today. In February, I attended the hearing for Carrie, and myself and another parent did report her due to ethics complaints. I was disheartened that the lawyer that did not consider it prudent to talk directly to either of us during preparation for the hearing. And while I thought he did a good job at showing how egregious her behaviors were, it allowed for a lot of speculation on our parental behaviors and actions. As I mentioned last month, I believe that the recommendations from the Professional Practice Committee were based on what I believe were many false statements made by Ms. Gemmer and Principal Voigt during that hearing. Last month, I highlighted several of those. One that I did not highlight was that Ms. Gemmer said she did not know why Ms. Schwartz canceled the mediation session. Ms. Gemmer had an opportunity during that hearing to ask her that question directly and instead decided to speculate on that and many things about Ms. Schwartz's character. She canceled the mediation. The cancellation of the mediation was also mentioned during that board meeting. And today I want to touch on what I do know about that. Due to a demand letter that Ms. Gemmer's lawyer sent to Ms. Schwartz and us parents, we consulted an attorney. And after that consultation, Ms. Schwartz did not believe that the mediation session was being entered to in good faith, and that is why it was canceled. Separate from that, this morning and last month, I read the comments attached to the digital agenda. Every story from the community of how Ms. Gemmer disregards deaf children and adults continues to break my heart. It continues to tear me up on why she would continue to do this to people after all her years. I would love to know the board's reaction to those stories as well, as I found myself tearing up as my son spoke just before. Again, I find myself asking in 2024, when we have zero tolerance policies for bullying, why we would leave a teacher to continue her abusive and humiliating trends towards these students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. We have Raul Cardenas, followed by Laura Morales, and then Morgan Bigelow.
Members of the board, my name is Raul Cardenas, father to Eric, or a student B who just spoke. As he mentioned, he used to love PTSD as it was a safe place. But our family knows some sign language, but there the majority of staff are fluent and he could talk to everyone freely. After Carrie stormed into their classroom, he came home from school upset, but didn't want to talk about it. My wife, who was working out of state at the time, had a video chat with him to get him to open up. Ms. Gemmer alleged that Ms. Schwartz told us what happened. That is untrue. I would have appreciated a heads up about what he witnessed. My wife and I decided that we had to take action to protect these kids after hearing dozens of stories of how she treated other kids and adults. We were confident if left unchecked, Ms. Gemmer would continue to intimidate and humiliate deaf students and staff members. We knew publicly speaking out that Ms. Gemmer might turn attention to Eric. However, our biggest miscalculation was that the school would sit back and give her permission to do so, protecting her over the students. We never thought it would get to safety plans and injunctions against harassment. We definitely did not plan to rip him out of PTSD. But when those safety plans were broken and the principal would instruct and defend Ms. Gemmer's breaking of those safety plans, what choice did we have? I don't regret that we spoke out, but I do wish we pulled Eric from the school much sooner and that he wouldn't have to endure as much as he did. He begged us not to pull him, but it became obvious that not removing him would be negligent. I believe it is in the best interest of the community to remove her license or at minimum remove her certification to work with deaf and hard of hearing students. Thank you.
Thank you. We're super proud of your son too.
Superintendent Horn, Dr. Kaur, members of the board. Up next is Laura Morales, followed by Morgan Bigelow.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Laura Morales. I am a proud parent of a deaf child who is 8 years old, and I'm also a teacher. In the year of 2021, in the fall of 2021, I completed my student internship at PDSD. And I witnessed daily how Carrie would walk around in the cafeteria, pretty much bullying, harassing kids in the cafeteria, yelling, screaming. And I was pretty much surprised and shocked at how nobody would go around and say anything about her behavior. It seemed like all of the teachers and staff there were pretty much accustomed to her. And when I would question about it, it seemed like she ran the school, everybody. It seemed like I remember her term was called Queen Bee, is what I understood, in that she was pretty much allowed to behave in this manner. And I was pretty shocked because this was the fourth school that I had interned at, and it was the first time that I had witnessed such toxic behavior. And it seemed like she was a leader of it. And so I'm here now speaking against and hoping that, we will never have a teacher like that again at the deaf school, and hoping that this brings a brighter future for our deaf kids, because they certainly deserve a lot better. And so I'm pretty much asking you board members to please take action on making sure that this teacher, Carrie, doesn't continue traumatizing our kids, because the way that she treats our kids is pretty much disregarding them and, traumatizing them for the rest of their lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Our final speaker is Morgan Bigelow.
Good afternoon. My name is Morgan Bigelow with the law firm of Lubin and Enoch. I'm here on behalf of Tracy Carlucci. I don't have any comments, but if the board has any questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes this call to the public.
All right. Thank you. I'll move us on to agenda item 9. This is the general session certification enforcement actions. 9A allows us to take 9A1 through 9A10 in a single motion, if that meets the approval of my colleagues. Hearing no objection to that, I would like to, do I have a motion to approve items 9A1 through 9A10?
So moved.
Vice President Haley, do I have a second?
Second.
Member Clark, thank you. Any conversation or discussion, comments? Hearing and seeing none. Great, cameras on, perfect. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Move us on to item 9B. This is the presentation, discussion, and possible action to approve the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee for the following individuals, starting Carrie Gemmer. We just heard some very compelling testimony, I think, in my mind, and I suspect in my colleagues' mind. So I would suggest that I would ask for a motion that the State Board of Education remand the matter back to the hearing body, the PPAC, with instructions to rehear the case with witness testimony for Carrie Gemmer, case number C 2023-000067. Again, this is a motion I'm requesting that would remand the matter back to PPAC. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Clark, do I have a second?
Second.
Member Kravickas. Any conversation, discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Can I make a quick comment?
You absolutely may, Superintendent Horn.
I just want to compliment the translator for keeping up with a lot of fast talk. I was very impressed.
Yeah, absolutely not an easy skill. And thank you, Superintendent Horn. I'll move us on to 9C. This is presentation and discussion and possible action to approve the revoking any and all certificate pursuant to state statute held by Jeremy Dietrich. Do I have a motion that the State Board of Education revoke any and all certificates held by Jeremy Dietrich and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Vice President Haley, do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Clay, thank you. Any conversation, discussion, or comments? Hearing and seeing none, I will then call a vote. All those in the favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Fantastic. Then I will move us on to agenda item 9D. Just a summary of current events. A reminder that our next board meeting is June 24th at 9 o'clock, and turn it to Executive Director Ross for any additional comments.
As always, agenda item 10 is just a reminder that our next board meeting is June 24th at 9. There is no July board meeting. And then our August board meeting and retreat will be local, as we discussed. And so thank you, everybody, for a great meeting, and to those who exercise their voice in the meeting as well in our calls to the public.
Fantastic. Then I will adjourn this meeting with thanks for my colleagues at 12:48.